I was standing on the rooftop terrace of the Vanguard Hotel, trembling with the joy of finally announcing my 8-week pregnancy to my husband's family. Instead of celebrating, my mother-in-law hurled a crystal flute of champagne directly at my feet and accused me of strapping on a silicone bump to steal a $6 million trust fund. Then, to prove her point, she shoved me down a flight of marble stairs. 7 months later, I walked into their high society gala and destroyed their entire empire. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight back against a toxic family who thought they could break you. The champagne shattered against the imported Italian marble floor, sending a spray of expensive alcohol and sharp glass across my ankles. I stood completely frozen, looking down at the sparkling puddle and then up at the woman who had just thrown it. Vivian, the undisputed matriarch of the family, stood across from me, breathing heavily. She was draped in her signature pearls and a custom silk gown, projecting the flawless image of Atlanta high society. But her face was twisted into a mask of visceral, ugly disgust that no amount of expensive makeup could hide. The soft jazz playing from the terrace speakers felt like a mockery of the tension suffocating our private dining table. You really think strapping a silicone prop to your waist gets a girl from Southside Atlanta access to generational wealth? Vivian snarled, her voice echoing off the glass walls. We all know the stipulations of the will, Jada. Terrence's grandfather was very clear. The $6 million trust unlocks only when Terrence produces a biological heir. You are barren, Jada. You have been barren for 5 years, and we are not going to sit here and let you fake a miracle to secure a payout. I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat felt paralyzed. I had planned this dinner for weeks. I had imagined the tears of joy, the embraces, the sudden healing of years of strained family dynamics. Instead, I was on trial. As a forensic accountant, I spent my days uncovering fraud and analyzing complex financial webs. I prided myself on seeing the truth hidden in the numbers, but standing there looking at the people I called family, I realized I had missed the most glaring deception of all. My brother-in-law, Jamal, leaned back in his leather chair and let out a dry, mocking laugh. He adjusted his expensive watch, shaking his head as if he was watching a poorly written television show. Beside him sat his wife, Chloe. Chloe was white blonde and came from a family that Vivian constantly reminded me possessed true old money. Chloe took a slow, deliberate sip of her martini and looked at me with an expression of pure pity. Anyone can buy a fake sonogram online, Jada, Chloe said, her tone dripping with condescension. It is honestly just tacky. We expected better from a forensic accountant. You spend your whole life auditing spreadsheets, so you should know that numbers do not lie. You cannot just invent a baby to balance your budget. I reached into my designer clutch. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, but it was not from fear. It was from a cold, rising fury that was settling deep in my chest. I pulled out the official sonogram, the very same piece of paper I had cried over just hours earlier in the clinic. I tossed it onto the pristine white linen tablecloth right next to Chloe's martini glass. Call the clinic, I said, keeping my voice dangerously level. Call them right now. The phone number is printed right there on the top left corner. It is real. I am 8 weeks pregnant, and no amount of your toxic gatekeeping is going to change the fact that I am carrying a child. I turned my gaze to Terrence. My husband. The man I had married 10 years ago. The man who had held me as I cried through 3 devastating miscarriages. The man who knew exactly how hard we had fought for this moment. I waited for him to stand up. I waited for him to slam his fist on the table, demand respect for his wife, and throw his mother and brother out of the hotel. Terrence looked at the sonogram. Then he looked at Vivian. He swallowed hard, adjusting his collar as a bead of sweat formed on his forehead. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes completely. Jada, baby? Terrence muttered, his voice weak and lacking any trace of conviction. Mom makes a point. You were acting a bit erratic last week when you thought you saw a positive test. The doctor said the hormone treatments could mess with your head. We should just calm down and talk to a professional. We can get you some psychiatric help before this goes any further. The air vanished from my lungs. The rooftop garden, the city lights, the jazz music, it all spun into a nauseating blur. My husband, the man whose looming 36th birthday was the ticking clock on a $6 million inheritance, was taking the word of a woman who had despised me since the day we met. Vivian had always hated that I grew up working class. She hated that I was a self-made woman who earned twice what her precious son did. She wanted Terrence to marry a society girl like Chloe. She wanted a daughter-in-law she could control. The money from the grandfather was everything to Vivian and Jamal. If Terrence turned 36 in exactly 7 months, without producing a child, the entire $6 million trust defaulted to Jamal and Vivian. My pregnancy was not a blessing to them. It was a direct threat to their bank accounts. They needed me to be crazy. They needed me to be a liar. "Help!" I asked, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You think I need psychiatric help because your mother refuses to believe we are finally having a baby? You're going to sit there and let them call me a scammer." "Do not twist his words, you manipulative gold digger," Vivian hissed, slamming her hands flat on the table and leaning toward me. "You thought you could pull off this scam and secure the bag before Terrence's birthday. You thought you could lock down the money and force us to bow to you. But Jamal and I are not letting some common street hustler steal what rightfully belongs to this family." Jamal chimed in, pointing a finger at me. "You have been digging through our family records, Jada. We know you review trusts for a living. You knew the deadline was coming up and you panicked. It is pathetic. Just pack your bags and walk away before we call the police for fraud." I looked at the four of them. Jamal was smirking with undeniable greed. Chloe was looking at her nails, acting completely bored by my heartbreak. Vivian was practically vibrating with malice, her eyes wide and furious. And Terrence, my supposed partner in life, was staring at the floor, too much of a coward to defend the mother of his child. 10 years of trying to fit into this family. 10 years of biting my tongue to keep the peace. 10 years of swallowing insults disguised as advice. I was completely done. I reached out and snatched the sonogram off the table, carefully placing it back into my clutch. "I am leaving," I said, turning my back on the lavish spread of food and the people I now recognized as enemies. "Terrence, do not bother coming home tonight. You can sleep at your mother's house since you clearly prefer her lap to our marriage." I did not wait for his response. I took 2 steps toward the sweeping stone staircase that connected the private terrace to the main lobby of the hotel. I heard the sudden harsh scrape of a chair against the marble floor. I heard fast, aggressive footsteps closing the distance behind me. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my shoulder with the force of a vice, gripping the fabric of my dress and yanking me backward. "You are not walking away with my family's wealth, you scammer!" Vivian shrieked, her voice entirely stripped of its high society polish. I turned to push her hand away, but before I could even raise my arms, she shoved me. She did not just push me away. She stepped into the motion, planting her feet and launching both her hands violently into my chest. It was a full-body thrust fueled by pure greed and hatred. My designer heels caught the slick patch of spilled champagne on the marble floor. Time seemed to slow to a torturous crawl. I reached out, grasping desperately at the empty air, trying to find the brass railing. My fingers brushed the cool metal, but I could not find a grip. The world tilted violently as my center of gravity shifted over the edge of the stairs. I hit the first stone step, and an explosion of absolute agony ripped through my side. The air was knocked completely out of my lungs. I tumbled backward, falling down the long, sweeping staircase in a chaotic, terrifying blur of night sky and hard stone. Every impact sent shockwaves of pain through my body, but my only thought was the tiny, fragile life growing inside my stomach. I wrapped my arms tightly around my waist, trying to shield my baby from the brutal blows of the marble steps. The last thing I heard before hitting the bottom landing was the sickening, hollow crack of my own bones snapping and Terrence finally finding his voice to scream my name. Then the lights of the city faded out and everything went completely black. Consciousness returns to me in slow, punishing waves of sterile white light and the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. The sharp smell of clinical antiseptic fills my lungs, followed immediately by a fierce stabbing pain in my left side. I try to sit up, but a heavy ache presses me flat against the stiff hospital mattress. Panic spikes hot and fast in my chest, overriding the physical agony. My hands fly to my stomach, frantically searching for the tiny life I was supposed to protect. A warm, familiar hand covers mine. Keisha. Dr. Keisha Reynolds is the chief of staff at this hospital, and the only person in this city who has had my back since our days at Spelman College. She leans over the bed, her face tight with professional focus, but her eyes shining with fierce, absolute relief. "The baby is still here, Jada," Keisha whispers softly, gripping my fingers to ground me. The heartbeat is faint, but it is remarkably stable. "You took a massive hit out there. You have a severe concussion and 3 fractured ribs. We are monitoring you closely, but your little girl is a fighter just like her mother." I let out a shaky breath that turns into a ragged, dry sob. My daughter is alive. I close my eyes, sending a silent prayer of gratitude into the quiet room. But that fleeting peace shatters before it can even settle into my bones. The heavy wooden door to my recovery room flies open, hitting the wall with a loud, aggressive thud. Vivian marches inside the skirt of her custom silk gown, swishing violently around her ankles. She is flanked by Jamal, Chloe, and my husband Terrence. None of them look like people who just watched a family member nearly die. They look like a boardroom execution squad arriving to finish a hostile takeover. Vivian wastes no time playing her part. She does not look at me. She turns entirely to Terrence, placing a manicured hand on his chest and adopting a voice dripping with manufactured trauma. "Terrence, thank heaven we brought her here quickly," Vivian says, wiping a completely dry eye. "I was terrified she was going to break her neck. I tried to grab her arm, but she was just so hysterical. I smelled the liquor on her breath the moment she arrived at the restaurant. When I gently suggested she get help for this phantom pregnancy delusion, she just snapped. She threw herself backward down those stairs to make me look like a monster." I stare at the woman who birthed my husband. The audacity is breathtaking. She just tried to kill me and my unborn child, and now she is standing in my recovery room, painting me as an unstable, drunken liability. She is weaponizing the angry, hysterical black woman trope to cover her own tracks, perfectly playing the victim for her son. Before I can force the words out of my bruised throat, Chloe steps forward. Her old money aesthetic is perfectly intact, her blonde hair pristine and undisturbed. She pulls a folded piece of paper from her designer handbag and thrusts it directly toward Terrence. "I knew something was wrong with her story," Chloe says, shaking her head in mock sympathy. Jada has always been deeply insecure about her working-class background compared to this family. She wanted that trust fund money so badly, she lost her mind. I called a contact at a private women's clinic across town. They rushed this file over to me. Terrence takes the paper, his eyes scan the document. "It is her medical history," Chloe adds, her voice laced with aristocratic poison. "Jada had her tubes tied 5 years ago. She is completely sterile, Terrence. She has been lying to you about trying for a baby this entire time." I look at Chloe and a dangerous clarity washes over me. I know exactly what she did. She paid a corrupt clinic worker to forge a medical record. As a forensic accountant, I analyze fabricated paper trails for a living. I can spot a desperate, sloppy forgery a mile away. But to a man blinded by his family's manipulation, it is treated as absolute gospel. I shift my gaze to my husband. I wait for the fire in his eyes. I wait for him to tear the paper in half, to tell Chloe to shut her mouth, to throw his mother out of the room for attempting murder. Instead, Terrence looks down at me. His face is not flushed with protective rage. It is slack with pity and profound disappointment. "Jada," Terrence whispers, his voice thick with condescending sorrow. "Mom said you were drinking heavily tonight. Why would you lie to me about something like this? We have enough money. You did not need to fake a pregnancy just to get my grandfather's trust fund. We can get you psychiatric help. We will find a good private facility. You need to be locked down and monitored until you are well." Something inside me dies in that exact second. The 10 years of marriage, the shared dreams, the late-night conversations about our future together evaporate into the cold hospital air. Terrence is not a partner. He is a weak, spineless extension of his mother's greed. He just agreed to commit me to a psychiatric ward to cover up his mother's attempted murder simply because it is easier than standing up to her. I do not scream. I do not cry. Crying is what they expect. Hysteria is the narrative they just spent 10 minutes building. I refuse to give them a single ounce of validation to feed their lies. The shattered, heartbroken wife disappears. The relentless forensic auditor takes over. I reach over with my uninjured arm and press the red call button on the side of my bed. My voice is steady, dropping to a tone so icy it makes Jamal take a physical step back. "Get these people out of my room," I say. My eyes locked dead onto Terrence. Terrence blinks, startled by the absolute lack of emotion in my voice. "Jada, be reasonable. You need an intervention. What you need is a criminal defense attorney," I reply, shifting my gaze to Vivian. "Because the next time we speak, it will be through a subpoena. Get out. We are completely done." Two burly hospital security guards step through the doorway. Keisha is right behind them, her arms crossed and her expression lethal. "You heard the patient," Keisha barks at the group. "Visiting hours are officially over for anyone without clearance. Move." Vivian scoffs, smoothing her dress as if the air in my room is suddenly beneath her. She leans close to Terrence. "Come along, son. We have lawyers to call. She is clearly a danger to herself and others." Chloe smirks at me as she links her arm through Jamal's. They walk out into the hallway and I can actually hear Jamal chuckling as the heavy wooden door swings shut. They think they have won. They think they have successfully framed me, secured the $6 million trust for themselves, and removed the working-class girl from their elite family tree. The room falls quiet again. The security guards take up a post directly outside my door, ensuring no one gets back in. Keisha walks over to the side of my bed. The professional mask she wore for them drops, entirely replaced by the calculating, ruthless demeanor of a woman ready for a war. She reaches into the pocket of her white lab coat. She pulls out a small metallic flash drive and places it gently onto my tray table. "I pulled the Vanguard Hotel security footage the minute they wheeled you through the emergency doors," Keisha says, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. "I made the copy right before Vivian's private security team showed up with a massive cash bribe trying to wipe the servers clean. Everything is on there. The argument, the push, the fall." She pulls a second thick folder from under her arm and lays it right next to the drive. "And this is your actual verified blood work from the lab downstairs." Keisha continues tapping the folder, completely untampered and legally sealed. "You are unequivocally 8 weeks pregnant with a perfectly intact reproductive system. Chloe's little forged document is a federal crime waiting to be prosecuted." I look at the flash drive glinting under the fluorescent lights. I look at my real medical file holding the undeniable truth of my daughter's existence. The pain in my ribs suddenly feels very small compared to the magnitude of what I'm about to do. I spend my life dismantling fraudulent empires and sending arrogant thieves to federal prison. Vivian and her vicious brood just handed me the keys to their own destruction. I pick up the flash drive, my fingers closing tightly around the cool metal. I look up at Keisha, the remnants of the old accommodating Jada completely erased from my soul. "Keisha," I say, a cold, sharp smile touching the corners of my mouth. "Let us go hunting." Within 24 hours, I vanished completely from their world. I did not leave a note on the kitchen counter of the house Terrence and I had shared. I did not pack a single bag of clothing. I did not even take my toothbrush. I simply ceased to exist. Through a private medical transport that Keisha quietly arranged, I was slipped out the back freight elevator of the hospital long before Vivian could send her high-priced lawyers to bully me into signing a non-disclosure agreement. My phone rang endlessly during the ride. Terrence left exactly 14 voicemails in the span of 2 days. At first, his voice was tight with panicked confusion, demanding to know where the hospital staff had transferred me. But by the 5th voicemail, the familiar pathetic influence of his mother had clearly taken hold. He stopped asking if I was safe and started whining about how we needed to act like adults. He said his mother was just worried about his financial security and that I had overreacted to a simple misunderstanding on the stairs. He actually suggested we sit down with a family mediator and a psychiatrist to discuss my supposed delusions. I listened to his weak, trembling voice echoing in the quiet of my transport car and felt absolutely nothing. No heartbreak, no longing. Just the cold, clinical detachment of a woman who had finally woken up. I deleted every single message, blocked his number, and tossed the SIM card out the window. Using resources I had kept strictly separated from our joint accounts, I moved directly into a luxury high-rise penthouse in the heart of Buckhead. I had purchased the property 8 months prior through a blind limited liability company. It was initially supposed to be a real estate investment property, a flip I was managing on the side to build my own independent portfolio. Instead, it became my absolute fortress. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning panoramic view of the Atlanta skyline. But I was not there to admire the scenery. I was there to build a war room. I did not sit in the dark crying over the family I had lost. I did not waste a single second mourning the husband who stood frozen while his mother tried to violently end my life and the life of our child. Grief is a luxury reserved for women who have the time and safety to be victims. I had neither. I was a black woman carrying a daughter who had already been targeted by predators in designer clothing. I had work to do. I set up my command center on the massive quartz kitchen island. I unboxed 3 high-resolution monitors, 2 heavily encrypted laptops, and established a secure virtual private network that routed my location through servers in Switzerland. Vivian and her arrogant brood thought a working-class girl from the south side of Atlanta did not understand how real generational wealth operated. They thought my forensic accounting degree just meant I balanced corporate checkbooks and filed tax returns. They vastly underestimated exactly what I do for a living. I do not just balance books. I hunt ghosts. I track the hidden money that corrupt people spend their entire lives trying to bury in the dark. I started my hunt with the Vanguard Family Trust. This was the $6 million prize that had driven Vivian to attempted murder. Hacking into the public tax filings and cross-referencing them with the estate documents I had subtly photographed from Terrence's home office months ago took less than 2 days. Terrence's grandfather had structured the family trust with ironclad old-fashioned stipulations. The money was locked in a high-yield account, specifically designed to bypass Vivian entirely and pass directly to Terrence, but only upon the verified birth of his first biological heir. But as I dug deeper into the dense legal addendums, I found the exact clause that explained the madness on the hotel terrace. It was a fail-safe provision buried on page 47. If Terrence failed to produce a biological heir by his 36th birthday, the entire $6 million trust defaulted to the secondary beneficiary. That beneficiary was his younger brother, Jamal. I stared at the glowing screens, the math suddenly aligning with sickening clarity. Terrence was turning 36 in exactly 7 months. My baby was due in 6.5 months. Vivian and Jamal did not just hate me because of my working-class background, or because I refused to bow to their toxic respectability politics. They needed me out of the picture because my child was going to trigger the payout and permanently intercept $6 million they had been counting on for years. They needed me to be barren. They needed me to be branded as a hysterical liar so they could easily annul the marriage before the baby arrived. The puzzle pieces were snapping into place, but my instincts told me something still felt off. Jamal was inherently greedy, but he was also remarkably lazy. He lived a lavish, excessive lifestyle, constantly boasting on social media about his supposed real estate investments and funding his wife Chloe's notoriously expensive tastes. Yet his actual documented income from his mid-level position at the family business did not support a fraction of their reckless spending. The math simply did not make sense. I pivoted my focus away from the trust and zeroed in on Jamal's corporate portfolio. I hacked my way into the shell companies Jamal managed under the Vanguard corporate umbrella. It was a labyrinth of deliberate financial obfuscation. It took me hours of relentless auditing, tracing wire transfers through offshore accounts, dummy corporations, and fake vendor invoices. But finally I found it. There was a massive bleeding hole in the primary operating accounts of the family business. Millions of dollars had been methodically and illegally siphoned off over the last 3 years. The theft was systematic, draining the company's liquid assets drop by drop to avoid setting off internal alarms. But the most shocking part was not the missing money, it was the authorization forms. Every single fraudulent wire transfer, Every fake invoice and every offshore deposit was digitally signed and authorized by Terrence. I pulled up the high-resolution scans of the digital authorizations, and my blood ran ice cold. The signatures were absolutely perfect matches to Terrence's handwriting, but I managed every single aspect of Terrence's personal and professional finances. I knew exactly where he spent his money, and I knew for a fact he did not even know these specific shell accounts existed. Someone was meticulously forging my husband's signature to drain the family empire dry. I cross-referenced the dates of the largest wire transfers with our personal calendar. 3 of the biggest authorizations were signed on days when Terrence and I were on a remote island in the Bahamas with absolutely zero internet access. He could not have signed them. The trap was set perfectly, and the sheer malice of it took my breath away. Jamal was not just stealing millions of dollars from the family business. He was framing his own oblivious brother for the entire federal crime. And suddenly Vivian's desperation to keep the trust fund locked made complete terrifying sense. If the grandfather's trust automatically unlocked my baby, it would trigger a mandatory comprehensive audit of the entire family estate by the bank's federal regulators. That audit would instantly expose the missing millions. It would expose the forged signatures. It would send Jamal straight to federal prison for wire fraud and embezzlement. They did not just want my baby gone to get the $6 million. They needed my baby gone to keep themselves out of a federal penitentiary. They were willing to kill me to keep the books closed. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, rubbing the slight curve of my stomach as the glowing monitors illuminated the dark penthouse. Jamal and Vivian were playing a dangerous high-stakes game of financial treason. But as I stared at the endless rows of fraudulent transactions, a new burning question emerged. Millions of dollars had vanished into thin air. But where exactly was Jamal funneling all that stolen cash? I stared at the gaping financial hole on my monitor. Millions of dollars had vanished into thin air through forged signatures and untraceable shell accounts. Jamal was inherently greedy, but he was not a criminal mastermind. He lacked the discipline to pull off a heist of this magnitude just to inflate his ego. He needed a reason to risk decades in federal prison, and I knew exactly where to look next. I shifted my focus away from Jamal and turned my complete attention to his wife. Chloe had spent the last 5 years making my life a living hell. She was the pristine blonde daughter of the Sinclair family, a lineage that Vivian worshipped with pathetic desperation. Vivian constantly paraded Chloe around as the ultimate standard of proper society. Whenever Vivian wanted to humiliate me, she would compare my working-class Atlanta roots to Chloe's supposedly vast generational wealth. Chloe played the part flawlessly. She wore vintage designer gowns, she summered in Europe, and she never missed an opportunity to remind me that Vanguard money was new money while Sinclair money was history. I opened a new encrypted search window. I bypassed the standard credit checks and dove straight into county tax assessments, public real estate databases, and federal bankruptcy filings. I searched for the Sinclair family estate in South Carolina. Chloe loved to talk about that sprawling historic property, boasting about its gardens and its legacy. She always claimed her parents were simply resting the estate for the season. It took me exactly 20 minutes to unravel a lie that had fooled Vivian and the entire Atlanta elite for an entire decade. The truth glowing on my screen was absolutely glorious. The prestigious Sinclair family was completely, utterly flat broke. I pulled up the legal foreclosure documents and read through the bitter details. The bank had quietly seized their historic estate exactly 3 years ago. Her parents had filed for bankruptcy protection shortly after their assets were liquidated to cover massive debts. Chloe did not have a trust fund. She did not have a hidden inheritance. She was a broke socialite desperately clinging to a dead legacy, living entirely on credit cards and pure arrogance. The pieces of the puzzle snapped together with violent clarity. The missing millions from the Vanguard operating accounts were not sitting in an offshore investment portfolio. Jamal was bleeding his own family dry to fund Chloe's fake lavish lifestyle. He was embezzling corporate funds to buy her the designer bags, the luxury cars, and the extravagant European vacations she needed to maintain her high society facade. He was buying Vivian's approval, using Vivian's own stolen money. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, my hands resting protectively on my pregnant belly. The sheer magnitude of their desperation finally made perfect, terrifying sense. It was never just about Vivian wanting to keep the $6 million trust for her favorite son. It was about pure criminal survival. If Terrence produced a biological child, the grandfather's trust would automatically unlock and transfer to our new family. By federal banking law, an automatic trust distribution of that size mandates a comprehensive audit of the entire Vanguard family empire to ensure the heir's assets are fully secure. An independent audit would take less than a day to expose the missing millions. It would expose the forged signatures. It would expose the dummy corporations. Jamal and Chloe would not just lose their country club memberships and their luxury cars. They would be indicted for federal wire fraud and embezzlement. They would lose everything and go straight to a federal penitentiary. That is exactly why Chloe used a shady connection to buy a forged medical document claiming I had my tubes tied. That is why Jamal pushed the narrative that I was having a mental breakdown. That is why Vivian shoved a pregnant woman down a flight of marble stairs without a second of hesitation. My unborn daughter was a literal death sentence to their freedom. They were completely willing to commit murder to keep those financial books closed. A cold, razor-sharp calm settled over me. They thought they had eliminated the threat. They thought I was currently locked away in a psychiatric facility or hiding in shame nursing my broken bones in a broken marriage. They had absolutely no idea I was sitting in a luxury penthouse holding the digital keys to their prison cells. I had the motive, I had the crime, I had the receipts. I just needed the perfect stage to execute their downfall. Suddenly, a sharp chime broke the heavy silence of the room. A notification popped up on my secondary monitor. It was an email routed through 3 different international proxy servers to hide the sender's location. The sender was anonymous, but the attached file was highly classified. It was an internal memo leaked directly from the Vanguard corporate office by a whistleblower who had clearly noticed the financial discrepancies and knew I was the only auditor who could decode them. I opened the heavily encrypted file and my eyes scanned the corporate letterhead. Vivian and Jamal were not waiting for the dust to settle. They were moving aggressively to secure their stolen empire. The document outlined a massive private event called the Legacy Gala. It was scheduled to be held at the most exclusive country club in the city. The guest list included every major investor, politician, and socialite in Atlanta. But it was the date of the gala that made my blood run ice cold. Vivian had scheduled the event for the exact day of Terrence's 36th birthday. The memo detailed the true purpose of the night. Under the guise of celebrating the family history, Vivian was going to use the gala to formally announce that Terrence had failed to meet the conditions of the grandfather's will. She was going to publicly transfer the $6 million trust directly into Jamal's name and crown him the sole executive manager of the entire Vanguard empire. They were planning to steal the company blind and celebrate their victory in front of the whole city. I looked at the date on the calendar hanging above my monitors. I was currently 4 weeks out from Terrence's birthday. I would be exactly 8 months pregnant on the night of their precious legacy gala. I closed the laptop and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the glittering Atlanta city lights. I placed both hands on my growing stomach, feeling a sudden, strong kick against my palm. Vivian wanted to throw a lavish party to celebrate her brilliant deception. She wanted to stand on a stage draped in stolen diamonds and finalize her perfect crime while the city applauded. I smiled, letting the cool reflection of the glass wash over my face. I was going to give her a party she would never forget. 7 months evaporated into the quiet hum of my penthouse. The calendar on my wall marched forward day by day, marking the steady rhythmic growth of the life inside me. I am now exactly 8 months pregnant. My daughter is healthy, strong, and incredibly active. Every sharp kick against my ribs is a constant grounding reminder of exactly why I walked away from the Vanguard family. I did not spend these last 7 months weeping over a broken marriage or mourning a husband who threw me to the wolves. I spent them building an inescapable financial and legal fortress. When you vanish completely from a narcissist's life, you give them the rope they need to hang themselves. I maintained absolute radio silence. I did not respond to a single email from Terrence. I ignored the weak, confused voicemails he left during the first few weeks, where he vacillated between demanding I come home and begging me to check into a wellness retreat. I changed my number, erased my digital footprint, and existed entirely within the secure walls of the high-rise I had purchased through a blind limited liability company. They thought they had chased me into the gutters of Atlanta. They had absolutely no idea I was sitting 30 floors above them watching their every move. While Vivian and Jamal were busy planning their hostile takeover, I was working quietly in the shadows with one of the most ruthless corporate litigators in the city. His name is Marcus, and he does not negotiate, he obliterates. I brought him the massive bleeding hole I found in Jamal's shell companies, and together we turned my forensic audit into a weapon of mass destruction. We did not just draft a standard divorce filing. We built a legal guillotine designed to sever every single tie between me and the Vanguard bloodline while simultaneously exposing their empire to federal authorities. Marcus and I sat at my massive quartz kitchen island, meticulously organizing every forged document, every offshore wire transfer, and every fake invoice Jamal had used to siphon $2 million from the family business. We prepared comprehensive federal financial fraud reports, including a perfectly documented tax fraud portfolio. It was securely bound and ready to be submitted directly to the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. We mapped out the exact trail of the stolen corporate funds, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jamal was funding Chloe's lavish lifestyle with embezzled company money. Jamal had forged Terrence's signature to drain the family trust, and we had the digital fingerprints to prove it. But the financial ruin of my brother-in-law was only half the battle. The personal severed ties needed to be equally absolute. Marcus drafted ironclad divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences and severe emotional distress. The custody agreement was drafted with zero room for debate. I demanded full legal and physical custody of our unborn daughter. Terrence would be granted heavily supervised visitation only if a judge deemed him psychologically fit, which, given his willing complicity in his mother's delusion, would be an incredibly difficult case for him to make. I was ensuring that the Vanguard family would never have the opportunity to poison my child with their greed or their lies. They wanted to claim my baby did not exist. I was going to make sure they never got to hold her when they finally realized the truth. Total silence is a powerful tool. Without my presence to contradict her, Vivian went to work spinning a masterclass in high society manipulation. Through Dr. Keisha and a few loyal colleagues who still kept their ears to the ground, I learned exactly what narrative my mother-in-law was feeding the Atlanta socialite circle. Vivian had been whispering in the ears of every country club board member, pastor, and wealthy investor in the city. Her story was a calculated theatrical masterpiece designed to completely assassinate my character and protect her family's reputation. According to Vivian, I had suffered a tragic psychotic breakdown. She told everyone who would listen that my inability to conceive had shattered my grip on reality, forcing me to purchase a silicone belly to trap her son. She claimed that when she gently confronted me with the truth at the Vanguard Hotel, I became violently hysterical and had to be locked away in a private psychiatric facility for my own safety. The sheer audacity of the lie was breathtaking, but it worked perfectly for their agenda. It painted Vivian as the long-suffering matriarch trying to protect her legacy from a deranged gold digger. Chloe, of course, happily played her part in the smear campaign. She paraded around the country club in designer clothes paid for by stolen money, shaking her head in mock sympathy whenever my name was mentioned. She told her tennis partners that she had always known my working-class background would eventually cause me to snap under the pressure of true wealth. But the most sickening part of the entire smear campaign was Terrence. My husband was actively playing the role of the tragically abandoned man. Keisha told me he was attending charity galas and society dinners, looking appropriately somber, soaking up the pity and sympathy of their wealthy peers. He was accepting their condolences for his crazy missing wife, all while standing next to the very brother who was actively robbing him blind. Terence chose the comfort of his mother's lies over the undeniable truth of his own child. He let them destroy my name to protect his impending inheritance, completely unaware that Jamal had already hollowed out the empire from the inside. Terence's cowardice solidified the last remaining block of ice in my heart. There was absolutely nothing left to save in that marriage. If he was perfectly willing to play the grieving husband while his mother plotted to steal our child's inheritance, I felt absolutely no guilt about the devastation I was about to unleash on his life. Then the catalyst finally arrived. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the package was delivered to my building's concierge. A loyal former colleague from my accounting firm had forwarded it, recognizing my name on the guest list, and knowing I would want to see it. I carried the thick, heavy envelope up to my penthouse and sliced it open. Inside, resting on a bed of black velvet, was a gorgeous gold foil invitation. The heavy cardstock was embossed with the Revengefamily crest, shining brightly under the penthouse lights. It was the formal invitation to the Legacy Gala. The event Vivian had been meticulously planning to cement her absolute control over the family wealth. The dress code printed at the bottom in bold, elegant script read strictly black tie. I looked at the date, and a slow, cold smile spread across my face. It was scheduled for this coming Saturday night, the exact day of Terence's 36th birthday, the absolute final deadline for the grandfather's $6 million trust to either unlock for my child or default entirely to Jamal. Vivian was throwing this extravagant party to celebrate her victory. She genuinely believed she had won the war. She thought she had successfully eliminated the barren working-class wife, secured the generational wealth for her favorite son, and hidden the massive financial fraud forever. She was going to use this gala to crown Jamal the sole manager of the Vanguard Empire right in front of the entire city. She wanted an audience to witness her ultimate triumph. I walked slowly into my master bedroom and stood in front of the massive floor-to-ceiling mirror. I was no longer the frightened woman crying on a wet marble staircase. I turned to the side, admiring the heavy, undeniable curve of my 8-month pregnant belly. My daughter kicked hard against my ribs, a sharp burst of life and reality that no forged medical document could ever erase. I traced the outline of my stomach, taking in the reflection of a woman who had spent 7 months turning her heartbreak into a loaded weapon. They wanted a society spectacle. They wanted a stage to flaunt their stolen money and their fabricated legacy. I looked directly into my own eyes, the reflection cold and completely unbothered. It is time to crash a party. The tires of my rented armored black SUV crunch against the pristine white gravel of the Peachtree Country Club driveway. The imposing colonial columns of the main clubhouse loom ahead, bathed in warm golden uplighting. This is the absolute epicenter of Atlanta's high society. It is an exclusive fortress where generational wealth goes to hide behind closed doors and NDAs. Tonight, however, it is the stage for a spectacular corporate execution. I step out of the vehicle and hand the keys to a bewildered valet. The cool night air washes over me, but I feel absolutely nothing but a razor-sharp focus. I have spent the last 7 months living as a ghost, carefully assembling a federal indictment that will burn the Vanguard Empire to the ground. Tonight, I am officially returning to the land of the living. I bypass the main reception desk and glide toward the grand foyer. I am wearing a custom-tailored form-fitting emerald green silk gown. The fabric was specifically chosen to cling to every single curve of my body, leaving absolutely zero room for interpretation. My 8-month pregnant belly precedes me like a shield. I am carrying a healthy, active baby girl who represents the total destruction of Vivian's carefully orchestrated reality. My hair is pulled back into a sleek chignon, and my makeup is flawless. I do not look like a woman who suffered a mental breakdown. I look like a woman who owns the building. I reach the massive heavy oak doors that lead into the primary ballroom. 2 private security guards step forward to block my path. I do not slow my pace. I simply reach into my clutch and retrieve the gold foil invitation, flashing the embossed Vanguard crest directly in their faces. They hesitate, glancing at my stomach and then back at the invitation. In that split second of confusion, I step perfectly between them and stand just out of sight, listening to the audio feeding through the ballroom speakers. Vivian is on stage. Her voice echoes through the cavernous space, dripping with artificial warmth and manufactured grace. I can picture her standing at the podium, perfectly manicured, soaking up the admiration of the city's elite. "We are gathered here tonight to celebrate more than just a birthday," she announces, her tone soaring with theatrical emotion. "We are here to celebrate the enduring legacy of the Vanguard name. For 36 years I have prayed for this exact moment. A family is not just defined by blood. It is defined by respectability. It is defined by unity and a shared commitment to excellence. We have weathered our share of storms recently. We have endured heartbreaking personal tragedies that threaten to pull us off course. But true legacy cannot be derailed by instability or deception." I stand behind the doors, listening to the sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy of her words. She is talking about my supposed mental breakdown. She is actively playing the tragic, resilient matriarch to a room full of politicians, investors, and socialites. She is selling them a story of survival, while wearing a diamond necklace paid for by the very company her younger son is currently robbing blind. Vivian continues, her voice swelling with pride. "That is why tonight I am officially passing the torch. Terrence has faced insurmountable personal challenges this year, and he needs time to heal away from the crushing pressures of our corporate empire. Therefore, it is my absolute honor to announce that Jamal will be stepping up as the sole executive manager of the Vanguard Trust. With his brilliant business acumen and his beautiful wife Chloe by his side, representing the pinnacle of old money grace, I know our future is incredibly secure." The crowd erupts into polite, enthusiastic applause. It is the perfect cue. I place both hands flat against the polished wood of the heavy oak doors and push hard. The doors swing open with a deep, resounding groan that slices cleanly through the applause. I step out of the shadows and directly into the brilliant, cascading light of the crystal chandeliers. The ballroom is packed with hundreds of guests, seated at velvet-draped tables. I pause for a single second at the top of the grand staircase, making sure every eye in the room has a chance to find me. The reaction is instantaneous and absolute. The string quartet, positioned on the balcony mid-chord, literally stops playing. A cellist drags his bow harshly across the strings, letting out an awful screeching sound that reverberates through the silence. The applause dies instantly. Forks drop onto china plates with sharp, clinking sounds. The room goes deathly silent. You could drop a pin on the plush carpet and hear it echo. I begin my descent down the grand staircase. My emerald gown catches the light, wrapping tightly around my massive, undeniable pregnancy. I walk with the slow, deliberate grace of a predator who has cornered her prey. Whispers begin to ripple through the sea of socialites as I walk down the center aisle. I hear the sharp intakes of breath. I see the widened eyes and the dropped jaws. They are staring at the woman they were told was locked away in a psychiatric ward for faking a pregnancy. They are looking at the living, breathing contradiction to every single lie Vivian has spun for the last 7 months. I keep my gaze locked dead ahead, refusing to acknowledge the gaping faces around me. I look toward the stage. Vivian is standing at the podium. The smug, triumphant smile has been completely wiped from her face. She looks as if she has just seen a ghost walk out of a grave. Her eyes dart frantically from my face to my stomach and back again. The diamonds around her neck glitter, but her skin has turned the color of wet ash. Beside her, Jamal is frozen, his champagne glass halted halfway to his mouth. Chloe looks like she is about to vomit. Vivian recovers her shock only because her survival instincts kick in. Her face twists with a malice so pure and unfiltered that several guests in the front row actually physically recoil from her. She grips the microphone stand with white knuckles, ripping the microphone from its cradle. "Security." Her voice booms across the silent ballroom, shrill and desperate, cracking under the pressure of her collapsing lies. Remove this woman immediately. She is trespassing. The private security guards stationed around the perimeter of the room step forward, but they hesitate. They are looking at a heavily pregnant woman walking calmly in a designer gown holding a VIP invitation. No one wants to be the man who tackles a pregnant woman at a high society gala. Their hesitation pushes Vivian entirely over the edge. She abandons all pretense of Southern charm and refinement. Jada, are you completely insane? Vivian screams into the microphone, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Have you lost your mind coming here tonight? Are you really still wearing that pathetic silicone prop? Do you think anyone in this room believes your sick delusions? Get her out of here before I call the police. I do not break my stride. I do not flinch. I do not offer her a single word of response. I let her unravel loudly and publicly in front of the very people she relies on for her social power. Her screeching voice only amplifies her guilt. I bypass the stage entirely and walk straight toward the main VIP table, situated directly in the center of the front row. Terrence is sitting there. He is wearing a custom tuxedo, perfectly groomed, but he looks like a man who is standing on the tracks watching a freight train bear down on him. He is paralyzed. His eyes are wide, completely locked on my stomach. He has spent the last 7 months believing his mother's lies. He has played the role of the tragic abandoned husband, accepting the pity of his peers, while quietly agreeing to annul our marriage. Now he is staring at the undeniable physical proof of his own cowardice. I reach the edge of the VIP table. The silence in the room is suffocating. Hundreds of people are holding their breath watching the collision. I do not look at Vivian screaming on the stage. I do not look at Jamal or Chloe. I look directly down into my husband's terrified eyes. Terrence cannot speak. His lips part, but no sound comes out. He is trembling slightly, his hands resting flat on the white linen tablecloth. I do not say a word. I reach out and grab his right hand. His skin is clammy and shaking. I pull his hand upward, closing the distance between us. I do not give him a chance to pull away. I slam his palm flat against the tight-stretched silk of my emerald gown, pressing his hand firmly into the center of my stomach. For a fraction of a second, the ballroom remains trapped in suspended animation. Terrence stares up at me, his chest barely moving. Then right on cue, our daughter delivers a violent, visible kick directly against the center of his palm. The impact is so strong it actually shifts the fabric of the gown. Terrence physically recoils. A sharp, ragged gasp tears out of his throat, tearing through the silence of the room. He pulls his hand back as if he has been burned by fire. All the blood drains instantly from his face, leaving him deathly pale. His eyes, wide with absolute horror, dart from my stomach up to my cold, unyielding stare, as the crushing reality of his betrayal and his mother's monstrous, unforgivable lie hits him all at once. Terrence snatches his hand back as if my flesh is made of molten iron. He stumbles backward, his polished dress shoes catching on the thick carpet. He crashes into the chair behind him, knocking it over with a loud clatter that echoes through the paralyzed ballroom. All the blood has drained from his face, leaving him looking like a hollow shell of the man I married. He stares at my stomach and then up at my face, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. "You are really?" He stammers, his voice barely a whisper, but carrying perfectly in the dead silence of the room. "But the documents," Mom said. I cut him off with a chilling glare. I do not speak. I do not offer him a single syllable of comfort or explanation. I simply lock my eyes onto his and deliver a look so devoid of any remaining human warmth that I watch the breath actually hitch in his throat. In that one silent glare, I let him see exactly what he has done. He chose the comfort of a forged medical file and the safety of his mother's skirt over the life of his own child. He stood by while she tried to murder us, and then he wore a custom tuxedo to celebrate the theft of our daughter's future. My gaze is a blade slicing through the last remaining thread of our decade-long relationship. Vivian watches the entire exchange from the stage, and I can see the exact moment sheer terror overrides her shock. The entire foundation of her masterfully spun narrative has just crumbled to dust in front of the most powerful people in Atlanta. The board members, the investors, the country club elite, they are all staring at her waiting for an explanation. Realizing the fake belly narrative is dead, Vivian panics. She needs a new weapon, and she needs it immediately to survive the social fallout. She practically leaps off the stage, her heavy diamond necklace swinging violently against her collarbone. She marches toward the VIP table, her face twisting into a mask of righteous aristocratic indignation. She switches tactics loudly to save face in front of her church and country club friends, pitching her voice to reach the back rows of the room. "So you got knocked up?" Vivian shouts, her voice vibrating with manufactured outrage. "We all know Terrence is not the father. You are just trying to pass off a stranger's bastard to steal our generational wealth." The audacity of the accusation sends a collective gasp rippling through the sea of seated guests. I can hear the furious whispering erupting at the surrounding tables. Vivian is playing her final desperate card, banking on the classic trope of the unfaithful working-class wife trying to trap a wealthy heir. She looks around the room, nodding to her associates, trying to rally their judgment against me. She wants them to view me as an opportunistic outsider who infiltrated their elite circle through deception. Terrence looks at his mother and then back at me. Even now, faced with the absolute undeniable truth of my pregnancy, he is searching his mother's face for permission on how to feel. He wants an excuse to absolve himself of the guilt that is currently crushing his chest. He takes a half step away from me, aligning his body with Vivian's. I do not raise my voice. I do not match her hysterical screaming. Panic is for people who are losing, and I have already won the war. I maintain perfect, absolute stillness. I slowly open the gold clasp of my designer clutch. The soft click cuts through Vivian's heavy panting. I reach inside and pull out a thick folded document heavily stamped with official legal seals. I take 2 deliberate steps forward, closing the distance between us. I do not hand it to Vivian. I drop it directly onto her pristine white dinner plate right next to her crystal champagne flute. The heavy paper hits the china with a satisfying thud. Certified non-invasive prenatal paternity test. I say, my voice carrying a quiet, lethal authority that commands the attention of every single soul in the ballroom. Conducted by a federally licensed medical facility, overseen by 2 independent board-certified geneticists, and fully notarized. 99.9% match. Terrence is the father. The absolute silence returns heavier and more suffocating than before. Vivian looks down at the document lying on her plate as if it is a live explosive. Her mouth falls open, but no sound emerges. The aggressive red flush of her cheeks drains away, leaving her looking old and thoroughly defeated. The second lie has been publicly executed. There is no alternate narrative left to spin. There is no corner left for her to back into. She is trapped in the blinding light of her own deceit. Terrence lets out a strangled sound. He reaches for the document, his hands shaking violently as he unfolds the thick pages. He reads the bold printed results. He traces the raised seal of the notary. He looks at me, tears finally welling in his eyes. He realizes the absolute magnitude of what his mother has done and what he has allowed to happen. His tragic abandoned husband routine dissolves into genuine, horrifying shame. The grand illusion is completely shattered. Vivian is exposed as an attempted murderer and a compulsive liar. Terrence is exposed as a spineless fool. The $6 million grandfather trust is officially unlocked and bound legally to the child growing inside me. And that specific reality is the exact trigger that finally breaks Chloe. Chloe has been standing slightly behind Jamal, her face pale and her breathing shallow. She knows exactly what this means. She knows that if my baby inherits the trust, the federal regulators are going to audit the Vanguard corporate accounts by Monday morning. She knows they will find the missing millions. She knows the fake invoices and the offshore shell accounts will be dragged into the sunlight. She knows her lavish fake life funded by a bankrupt estate and stolen corporate funds is over. The federal penitentiary is calling her name. The perfectly polished, old-money Southern Belle routine completely evaporates. Desperation strips away her refined facade, leaving behind a vicious, terrified woman backed into a corner. She pushes past Jamal and marches right up to me. Before Vivian can even process the paperwork, Chloe stands up red in the face trying to protect her husband's impending trust fund. She completely abandons her carefully cultivated high society manners. She is desperate to protect the money she relies on to cover up the massive embezzlement ring funding her entire existence. "You are still just a ghetto gold digger." Jada. Chloe screams, her voice shrill and echoing with unhinged panic. "You do not know how to manage real wealth. Jamal and I are the future of this family." I look at Chloe. I look at the panicked sweat forming on her forehead. I look at the terrified deer in the headlights expression on Jamal's face as he realizes his wife just publicly laid claim to money they are actively stealing. The entire room of Atlanta's elite watches as the pristine daughter of the Sinclair family loses her mind over a trust fund she has absolutely no legal right to touch. This is the exact moment I have spent 7 months waiting for. The trap has been sprung, and they just locked the cage from the inside. I tilt my head, letting a slow, calculated smile spread across my face. I look Chloe dead in the eyes and deliver the line that will end her entire world. "I was hoping you would say that, Chloe." I step away from the VIP table, leaving Terrence suffocating in the thick, heavy atmosphere of his own guilt. My eyes lock onto the stage where Vivian and Jamal stand frozen like marble statues. I gather the heavy silk of my emerald gown and begin to ascend the short flight of stairs leading directly to the podium. The entire ballroom watches in stunned fascination. No one moves to stop me. The private security guards remain firmly planted at the perimeter, completely neutralized by the sheer unprecedented spectacle unfolding before them. They are trained to handle unruly drunks and aggressive paparazzi, not pregnant wives armed with forensic genetic evidence. Vivian watches me approach her mouth working soundlessly. I step up to the podium and reach out. I do not ask for permission. I simply wrap my fingers around the microphone stand and pull it firmly from her grasp. She is so shocked by my physical proximity and my absolute terrifying calm that she lets it go without a fight. I tap the microphone twice. The sharp percussive thuds echo through the cavernous space, demanding the absolute attention of every politician, investor, and socialite in the room. The silence is so heavy it feels like a physical weight pressing down on the ballroom. I look up toward the glass-enclosed audiovisual booth suspended above the balcony. I give a slow, deliberate nod to the technician. He is a brilliant young man who was more than happy to accept a $10,000 cash retainer to ignore Vivian's meticulous run of show tonight. Right on cue, the massive digital projection screens flanking the stage go completely black. The glowing golden Vanguard family crest, which had been proudly dominating the room, vanishes into the darkness. A collective murmur ripples through the crowd. They think it is a technical glitch. They assume a breaker has blown. They have absolutely no idea they are about to witness a live corporate execution. The screens flicker back to life, illuminating the darkened ballroom with the harsh, glaring light of high-resolution legal documents. They are not standard spreadsheets or boring quarterly reports. They are deeply personal, incredibly damning public records. The undeniable seal of the Federal Bankruptcy Court is projected 20 feet high for every single member of Atlanta's elite to see. The documents detail the complete and total liquidation of the Sinclair family assets. I look down at Chloe, who is still standing near the front tables, her face flushed red with her previous arrogant outburst. I speak clearly and evenly into the microphone, letting my voice resonate with total, unyielding authority. "Proper wealth, Chloe. Your parents' estate was repossessed 3 years ago. You have been living on credit and lies." The words hit the room like a seismic shockwave. I gesture to the massive screens behind me, letting the crowd absorb the data. The foreclosure notices on their ancestral home in Savannah are displayed in crystal clear definition. The repossession orders for their luxury vehicles follow immediately after. The defaulted loans and the massive, staggering mountain of debt that her parents accumulated while desperately trying to maintain the illusion of high society prominence are laid bare for the entire city to witness. Chloe Sinclair, the woman who had spent the last 2 years looking down her nose at my working-class background, brings absolutely nothing to the Vanguard empire but an empty bank account and a fraudulent pedigree. I watch the realization sink in across the room. These are people who pride themselves on exclusivity. Finding out that one of their most snobbish peers is fundamentally destitute is the ultimate scandal. The reaction from the crowd is vicious and immediate. High society is incredibly unforgiving when it comes to fake wealth. It is a cardinal sin in their world. I watch as the prominent matriarchs of Atlanta, the exact women Chloe desperately courted for prestigious tennis matches and exclusive charity board seats, pull their phones out of their beaded clutches. Dozens of camera lenses are suddenly pointed directly at the screens, and then down at Chloe, recording her humiliation for the country club group chats. Flashbulbs begin to pop, illuminating her absolute horror. The polite whispers escalate into a low roaring buzz of scandalized gossip. Chloe is completely ruined in her social circle. She stares up at the foreclosure documents, her entire manufactured identity stripped away in a matter of seconds. The color violently drains from her face. She covers her mouth with her trembling hands and bursts into ugly, heaving tears. Her carefully applied designer makeup begins to run down her cheeks in dark streaks as she collapses back into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Vivian finally snaps out of her paralyzed state. The reality of the catastrophic public humiliation hits her like a physical blow. She realizes the fake belly narrative is entirely dead, and now her hand-picked flawless daughter-in-law is being exposed as a broke fraud in front of her most important peers. Vivian lunges toward me, trying to cover the microphone with her hands. "Turn it off!" Vivian screams, her voice shrill and unhinged, completely abandoning her refined southern drawl. "Turn those screens off right now. Security, get up there and break down that door." She waves frantically at the audio-visual booth, pointing a trembling, manicured finger at the glass. But the technician simply crosses his arms and leans back in his comfortable leather chair. He had locked the heavy steel door from the inside exactly as I had instructed him to do. The security guards at the bottom of the balcony stairs tug at the handle, but the thick, reinforced door refuses to budge. Vivian is completely powerless on her own stage. She is trapped under the blinding light of the projectors, forced to watch her carefully constructed empire unravel in real time while her peers record every agonizing second. I step away from Vivian's flailing arms, keeping a firm iron grip on the microphone. I turn my attention slowly and deliberately to Jamal. He has been standing near the edge of the stage, attempting to blend into the shadows, but there is nowhere left to hide. His eyes are wide with sheer terror. He is sweating profusely through his expensive designer suit. He knows exactly what is coming next. I look out at the sea of captivated faces, ensuring the microphone catches every syllable and deliver the next devastating blow. But the real question is, how has Chloe been buying $10,000 bags while completely broke? I do not wait for an answer. I snap my fingers, pointing directly at the booth. The AV technician presses the next button. The foreclosure documents vanish, replaced instantly by a sprawling complex web of bank transfers, wire logs, and offshore routing numbers. The sheer scale of the financial forensic evidence projected onto the screens is breathtaking. I have color-coded the transactions to make it incredibly easy for the investors and board members in the room to understand the theft. Bright red lines connect the primary Vanguard corporate accounts to a series of dummy shell companies. Bold green lines trace the money flowing directly from those shell companies into Chloe's personal offshore accounts. I continue speaking, letting the undeniable evidence wash over the crowd. I detail every fake invoice. I point out every fraudulent vendor payment. I expose every single time Jamal Vanguard forged his brother's signature to siphon money out of the family trust to fund his wife's pathetic illusion of wealth. It is all right up there on the screen. $2 million stolen directly from the company the people in this room are actively invested in. I watch the faces of the stakeholders contort from confusion into pure, unadulterated fury. They trusted Vivian. They trusted the Vanguard name. And now they are seeing irrefutable proof that their money was used to buy designer shoes and fund a fraudulent lifestyle for a desperate couple. The ballroom erupts into total and utter chaos. The wealthy investors seated at the prime tables are standing up, shouting and demanding answers from the stage. The board members are staring at the screens, their faces pale with the horrifying realization of the massive corporate fraud unfolding before their eyes. They are watching their investments burn. Jamal completely loses his mind. The cool, arrogant facade of the favored golden child shatters into a million jagged pieces. He realizes he is not just facing severe social ruin, he is facing decades in federal prison. The sheer panic triggers a violent, desperate rage. He lets out a guttural, unearthly scream and physically lunges toward me. His hands are outstretched, his eyes wide with unhinged fury. He covers the distance between us in a fraction of a second, completely intent on silencing me by any physical means necessary. He is not thinking about the crowd or the cameras recording his every move. He is a cornered animal lashing out to survive. But before he can even lay a single finger on me, a blur of black tuxedo fabric intercepts him with brutal force. Terrence finally steps in. He hits the stage with explosive speed, tackling his younger brother with a force that shakes the heavy wooden floorboards beneath my feet. He grabs Jamal by the lapels of his expensive jacket and violently shoves him backward against the heavy velvet curtains lining the back of the stage. The impact knocks the wind out of Jamal, leaving him gasping for air against the thick fabric. Terrence stands directly between us, his chest heaving, his fists clenched tight enough to turn his knuckles bright white. The cowardly paralysis that had gripped him at the VIP table is entirely gone, replaced by a fierce, terrifying protective rage. The veins in his neck are bulging. He looks like a man who has just woken up from a very long, very dark nightmare, only to find his own blood holding the knife. He looks up from the sprawling, undeniable evidence of massive financial fraud, lighting up the screens, and stares directly into the terrified, guilty eyes of the brother who has been actively destroying their family legacy from the inside out. He shoves Jamal harder against the wall, the thud echoing through the microphone I am still holding. "What is she talking about?" Jamal Terrence demands, his voice a deep, thunderous roar that slices cleanly through the absolute chaos of the ballroom. Jamal struggles against his brother's iron grip, his expensive tailored suit bunching around his shoulders. He opens his mouth to speak, but only a pathetic, stammering sound escapes. His eyes dart wildly around the room, searching for an exit that does not exist. He looks at his mother for salvation, but Vivian is paralyzed, staring up at the damning financial documents illuminating the ballroom. I do not let Jamal formulate a lie. I step closer to the edge of the stage, gripping the microphone tightly. My voice slices through the heavy, charged air of the ballroom, commanding absolute silence. "He is talking about your complete financial ruin, Terrence." I say my words dropping like anvils onto the polished wood floor. "He is talking about the fact that your own brother has been methodically bleeding your accounts dry for the last 2 years. I turn back to the audio-visual booth and deliver a sharp nod. The massive screens behind me shift instantly. The complex web of transactions dissolves into a stark side-by-side comparison of 2 documents. On the left is Terrence's actual verified signature from our marriage certificate. On the right is a signature pulled directly from a Vanguard corporate wire transfer authorization. To the untrained eye, they look identical. But beneath the documents, a certified affidavit from a federal handwriting expert flashes onto the screen, highlighting the microscopic discrepancies, the hesitation marks, the incorrect pressure points. Jamal did not just borrow from the company Terrence. I explain, walking slowly across the stage so every person in the room can track my movements. He bypassed the primary family trust and went directly into the capital reserves specifically designated under your name. He utilized fictitious consulting fees and bloated vendor invoices for Vanguard properties that do not even exist. He created ghost payrolls for shell companies registered in Delaware. The screens shift again, displaying the incorporation documents for a company called Apex Solutions, LLC. The registered owner is listed clearly in bold black text, Chloe Sinclair Vanguard. Those ghost payrolls funneled your money into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands before bouncing right back into Chloe's personal checking account. I continue, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Your brother forged your signature over 40 different times. He siphoned exactly $2.1 million out of your future to pay for his wife's fraudulent illusion of high society wealth. He bought her Birkin bags and covered her parents' defaulted country club dues with the money your grandfather left for you. Terrence stares up at the massive projection screens, his breathing ragged and shallow. He looks at the dates on the forged wire transfers. He recognizes them. They correlate perfectly with the times Jamal had asked to use his private office or requested access to his secure digital files. The ultimate betrayal washes over Terrence's face. He turns his head slowly, looking at Jamal, who is still pinned against the heavy velvet curtains. Jamal refuses to meet his brother's eyes, looking down at his own polished shoes in total defeat. Vivian finally finds her voice. Her survival instinct overrides her shock, and she marches toward the center of the stage, placing herself between her two sons. She is desperate to stop the bleeding, to salvage whatever tiny fragment of the Vanguard reputation remains intact. She smooths down the front of her designer gown and forces a strained, condescending smile, attempting to project the authority of a seasoned matriarch. "Terrence, let your brother go right now," Vivian commands, her voice trembling slightly, but loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "This is entirely unnecessary. This is a private family matter being twisted by a bitter woman. The money was not stolen. It is Vanguard money. It belongs to all of us. It was simply an internal family loan to help Jamal and Chloe through a temporary cash flow crisis. We were going to pay it back." I laugh. The sound is cold and hollow, devoid of any actual amusement. It cuts through Vivian's pathetic attempt at damage control like a surgical scalpel. "An internal family loan," I repeat, mocking her exact cadence. "A loan requires a promissory note, Vivian. A loan requires the knowledge and consent of the person whose accounts are being drained. This was a federal crime." But the most fascinating part of this entire corporate tragedy is not that Jamal is a thief. The truly fascinating part is how far you were willing to go to cover it up. I turn back to the booth and signal the technician for the final devastating blow. The screens flicker and go completely white. Then a series of private emails populate the projection. The sender is listed as Vivian Vanguard. The recipient is Jamal Vanguard. The timestamp shows they were sent exactly 8 months ago, the exact same week I discovered I was pregnant. Vivian gasps loudly, bringing both hands up to cover her mouth. The blood drains so rapidly from her face I genuinely think she might faint. She reaches out blindly, gripping the wooden podium to keep herself standing. I read the text of the emails aloud, ensuring that no one in the back of the room misses a single word. "If Jada gives birth to that baby, the grandfather trust unlocks automatically." I read, my voice ringing with brutal clarity. "If the trust unlocks, the bank is legally required to mandate an independent forensic audit of all Vanguard accounts. The auditors will find the missing $2 million. They will see that you forged Terrence's signature. You will go to federal prison, Jamal. We have to get rid of her. We have to invalidate the pregnancy before the baby is born. We have to make Terrence believe she is insane." The silence in the ballroom is no longer just shocked. It is utterly horrified. The elegant facade of the Legacy Gala has been ripped away, revealing a dark, rotting core of absolute moral bankruptcy. I look out at the audience, watching the realization settle over the faces of the most powerful people in Atlanta. I see Reverend Thomas, the pastor of the megachurch Vivian has attended for 3 decades. He is staring at the stage with profound disgust, shaking his head slowly before turning his back and walking directly toward the exit. I see the senior members of the country club board the women Vivian had spent years manipulating and bribing for social dominance, leaning away from the stage as if she carries a contagious disease. I see the Vanguard corporate investors urgently typing on their phones, undoubtedly contacting their legal counsel to freeze every single asset tied to the family name. They are watching a woman who actively orchestrated the psychological destruction of her own pregnant daughter-in-law just to protect a thief. They are witnessing a mother who was perfectly willing to discard her unborn grandchild and manipulate her eldest son into a fraudulent divorce to avoid a prison sentence. Vivian's entire social universe is collapsing in real time. The respectability she prized above human life is turning to ash in her mouth. She tries to reach out to the front row, mouthing desperate pleas to her former friends, but they avert their eyes, refusing to acknowledge her existence. The social execution is absolute. Terrence releases his grip on Jamal's jacket. He lets his brother slump against the stage wall, sliding down until he is sitting on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of his own greed. Terrence steps away from his family as if proximity to them might physically contaminate him. He looks at his mother. He looks at the woman who raised him, who convinced him that his wife was a deranged gold digger, who held his hand while he filed annulment papers. The realization that he was nothing more than a pawn in her desperate cover-up completely shatters him. He turns away from the stage and looks at me. He looks at the emerald silk stretching across my 8-month pregnant belly. He sees the absolute unwavering strength in my posture. He remembers the vows he abandoned and the loyalty he threw away for a family that viewed him as nothing more than a bank account to be plundered. Terrence walks slowly down the short flight of stairs, his movements stiff and uncoordinated. He approaches me, stopping just 2 feet away. The ambient light from the crystal chandeliers catches the tears streaming freely down his face. His broad shoulders shake with the force of his suppressed sobs. The arrogant, entitled heir to the Vanguard Empire is entirely gone. He looks into my eyes, searching for a shred of the woman who used to love him. He finds absolutely nothing but cold, indifferent steel. Terrence collapses forward, dropping heavily to his knees, directly in front of my pregnant belly. He brings his hands up, hovering them inches from my stomach, too terrified to actually make contact. He bows his head, his tears splashing onto the pristine white carpet beneath us. "Jada, my God," he weeps, his voice breaking violently. "I am so sorry. I did not know. I was blind. We can fix this. Please let me be a father." I look down at the man kneeling on the pristine white carpet of the Peachtree Country Club. Terrence is weeping. Heavy, pathetic sobs shake his broad shoulders, tearing through the immaculate tailoring of his custom tuxedo. He reaches out his hands, hovering inches from the emerald silk draped over our unborn daughter. But an invisible barrier of my own, sheer disgust, stops him from making contact. He looks up at me, with red-rimmed eyes pleading for a lifeline. He expects the woman who spent a decade trying to mold herself into the perfect Vanguard wife. He expects forgiveness because infinite forgiveness is exactly what the women in his family are trained to offer. They are conditioned to look the other way, to swallow their pride, and to protect the men of the Vanguard bloodline at all costs. I do not offer him a single ounce of grace. The well of my empathy has been permanently drained and cemented shut. "You are not blind, Terrence," I say. My voice is stripped of any residual warmth or affection. It rings through the silent ballroom with the cold, mechanical precision of a judge delivering a death sentence. "You were comfortable." He flinches violently as the words strike him, physically rocking back on his heels. I take a deliberate half-step backward, breaking the invisible tether that once connected us. "When your mother handed you a forged psychiatric evaluation designed to completely destroy my character, you did not ask questions." I continue, projecting my voice so every socialite and investor in the front row can hear his cowardice laid bare. "You did not demand a second medical opinion. You did not hire a private investigator. You did not defend your wife. You saw an easy exit out of a complicated situation. You saw a convenient way to maintain your precious inheritance without having to stand up to the tyrannical matriarch who controls your purse strings. You chose the safety of your mother's lies over the undeniable reality of my truth." Terrence shakes his head, his tears splashing heavily onto the polished floorboards. "Jada, please," he whimpers, his voice cracking under the weight of his public humiliation. "I was manipulated. She told me you were sick. She told me you needed to be locked away for your own good. I thought I was protecting you." "You were protecting your trust fund," I snap, slicing through his pathetic excuse like a scalpel. "You let them paint me as a deranged gold digger. You stood at charity galas and country club dinners soaking up the sympathetic pity of your wealthy friends. You accepted their condolences for your tragically insane wife, while I sat in an empty high-rise fighting tooth and nail to protect the child you were perfectly willing to erase from existence. You chose your comfort over my sanity. You chose your status over your daughter. A tall figure detaches from the crowd of stunned onlookers standing near the main aisle. Marcus, my lead corporate litigator, strides into the harsh, glowing light of the projection screens. He looks sharp, lethal, and entirely unbothered by the high society panic radiating through the ballroom. He does not speak a single word. He simply walks up to Terence, who is still weeping on the floor, and drops a thick, heavy stack of legal documents directly onto his lap. The heavy thud of the paper hitting Terrence's thighs sounds like a gavel striking a sound block. Terrence stares down at the terrifying stack of paper. The front page bears the official embossed seal of the Atlanta family court. Those are divorce papers, I state, keeping my posture absolutely rigid. And the terms enclosed within them are completely non-negotiable. I am claiming full legal and physical custody of our daughter. You will be granted heavily supervised visitation only if a court-appointed psychologist deems you fit to be in her presence. You will have absolutely no say in her education, her medical care, or her upbringing. Terrence scrambles, gripping the thick stack of papers as if they are burning his skin. No, he gasps, shaking his head frantically. No, you cannot do this. You cannot take my child away from me. We are a family, Jada. Families stick together. Families weather the storms. We can go to counseling. We can move away from Atlanta today. I will walk away from the company. I will leave all this money behind. Just please do not cut me out of her life. He is using the exact same empty, manipulative platitudes his mother used for decades to maintain control over her empire. He is using the inherited vocabulary of abusers who expect infinite second chances simply because they share a last name. I look at his grasping hands and feel absolutely nothing but a deep, settling revulsion. Do not dare use that word with me, I reply, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Family is an action, Terrence. Family is a shield. Family protects each other when the world turns hostile. When I was cornered by your mother and your brother, when they actively conspired to lock me in a psychiatric ward and steal my child's future, you did not act like family. You acted like a coward. I let my gaze sweep over the room, taking in the horrified faces of his peers, before locking my eyes back onto his tear-stained face. You left me to be eaten by wolves because it was significantly easier than fighting them, I say, dismantling his final argument. You do not get to claim the title of father just because your biology is involved. A father protects. A father fights. A father burns the world down to keep his child safe. You surrendered before the battle even began. You only offer to walk away from the money now because you know the money is already gone. The man I married died the exact day he let his mother forge my medical records. The man kneeling in front of me right now is just a stranger holding a stack of divorce papers. You will never be my family again. Terrence collapses forward, burying his face in his hands, entirely broken. On the stage, Vivian has watched her entire meticulously curated universe collapse in the span of 15 minutes. Her youngest son is facing a massive federal indictment for corporate embezzlement. Her hand-picked, flawless daughter-in-law has been publicly exposed as a destitute fraud. Her eldest son is sobbing on the floor, stripped of his marriage, his dignity, and his child. The iron grip she held over Atlanta's high society has been permanently obliterated. The very people Vivian spent her entire life trying to impress are actively turning their backs on her. I watch Reverend Thomas, the pastor of the prominent megachurch Vivian has funded for 3 decades, stand up from his table. He stares at the stage with profound, unmasked disgust, shaking his head slowly before walking directly toward the exit. The senior members of the country club board, the elite women Vivian had spent years manipulating for absolute social dominance, are leaning away from the stage as if she carries a lethal contagion. They are watching a woman who actively orchestrated the psychological destruction of her own pregnant daughter-in-law. They are witnessing a matriarch who is perfectly willing to discard her unborn grandchild to avoid a corporate audit. Vivian's complete moral bankruptcy is on full display, and her social execution is absolute. The realization that she has lost everything completely fractures Vivian's mind. The polished, refined Southern belle vanishes. She steps over Jamal, who is still slumped in shock against the stage wall, and charges toward the edge of the platform. Her face is a mottled, aggressive purple. The veins in her neck are straining against her heavy diamond necklace. "You are a psychotic lying witch!" Vivian screams, pointing a shaking manicured finger directly at my face. Her voice is shrill and completely unhinged, bouncing wildly off the crystal chandeliers. "No one in this room believes a single word you say. Those screens are full of fabricated lies. You forged those bank transfers to frame my brilliant son. You hacked our gala to spread your sick delusions because you are bitter and barren." She turns frantically toward the paralyzed private security guards who are still standing uselessly by the heavy oak doors. They are staring at her with wide eyes, making absolutely no move to intervene. "Do your jobs!" Vivian shrieks, spittle flying from her lips as she loses total control. "Arrest her right now. Call the police and have this trespassing lunatic dragged out of my club in handcuffs. She is dangerously insane. Everything she brought here tonight is a complete fabrication." I do not flinch. I do not take a step back. I do not raise my voice to match her frantic, desperate hysteria. I simply stand tall, bathed in the harsh white light of the projectors, holding the microphone with total relaxed authority. I look up at Vivian, watching her drown in her own pathetic, aggressive denial. I shake my head slowly, a dark, knowing smile curving my lips. "I didn't just bring financial documents tonight, Vivian." The chaotic murmurs of the ballroom instantly evaporate, replaced by a suffocating, razor-thin silence. The very air in the room feels highly combustible, primed to ignite at the slightest spark. I maintain my grip on the microphone, letting the heavy, terrifying weight of my statement settle over the crowd. Vivian's frantic screeching demands for security die in her throat. She stares at me, her chest heaving, her eyes darting nervously toward the massive projection screens, clearly terrified of what piece of damning evidence might materialize next. I do not look at the screens. I do not look at the horrified faces of the country club elite, nor do I acknowledge Terrence, who is still kneeling on the floor, a shattered, pathetic shell of a man. Instead, I slowly and deliberately lift my left arm. I pull back the cuff of my emerald silk gown to reveal the sleek, diamond-encrusted face of my Cartier watch. The ballroom is so profoundly quiet that I can actually hear the faint, rhythmic ticking of the second hand. I tap the crystal face of the watch with one perfectly manicured fingernail. The sharp click resonates through the microphone. It is exactly 11:59, I announce, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings with cold, terrifying precision. We are 60 seconds away from midnight. And in exactly 1 minute, Terrence officially turns 36 years old. Terrence slowly lifts his head from his hands. His bloodshot eyes are wide with confusion. He does not understand why I am bringing up his birthday in the middle of a corporate massacre. Vivian, however, understands perfectly. I watch the realization hit her like a physical blow to the stomach. Her jaw goes completely slack. The aggressive mottled purple flush of her skin instantly drains away, leaving her face a chalky, sickly white. She takes a stumbling step backward, her hand blindly reaching out to grip the edge of the podium for physical support. "No," she whispers, the word barely escaping her lips. "You cannot do this. You do not have the authority." I reach into the same designer clutch that held the DNA results and withdraw a second document. This one is noticeably older, printed on thick, heavy stock legal parchment, and bound with a dark blue ribbon. It bears the unmistakable watermark of the original Vanguard family law firm. I unfold the heavy pages with slow, deliberate movements. "This is the original, unmodified trust deed drafted by your late grandfather, Terrence," I declare, holding the document up for the entire room to see. "A man who, unlike your mother, possessed actual business acumen and the foresight to protect his legacy from greedy, incompetent scavengers." I step up to the podium, forcing Vivian to shrink back from my proximity. I flatten the document against the polished wood and lean into the microphone. Section 4, Paragraph B. I read aloud, my diction razor sharp, ensuring every single investor and board member hears the exact legal parameters of their ruin. Upon the occasion of his 36th birthday, the principal sum of $6 million shall vest entirely to Terrence Vanguard. However, should Terrence Vanguard possess a verified biological heir at the exact moment of vesting, the primary management of the trust bypasses the interim executors entirely. The funds shall be immediately and irrevocably locked into a secure generation, skipping trust bound exclusively to the heir. I look up from the parchment. The digital clock on the wall at the back of the ballroom flashes exactly 12 a.m. Happy birthday, Terrence, I say, my voice devoid of any warmth. As of this exact second, the $6 million grandfather trust has officially bypassed Vivian and Jamal entirely. Because I am carrying your verified biological daughter, the entire principal has just locked directly into an account for her. And as her sole legal guardian, possessing full physical and legal custody pending our divorce, I am now the exclusive conservator of that trust. You have absolutely no access to it. Your mother has no access to it. It is gone. The magnitude of the financial checkmate strikes the room with devastating force. The $6 million was the absolute bedrock of the Vanguard empire. It was the only tangible capital keeping their fraudulent, over-leveraged business afloat. Without that money, the entire house of cards immediately collapses into dust. Jamal snaps out of his catatonic daze against the back wall of the stage. He pushes himself up, his eyes wild, his expensive suit wrinkled and ruined. The prospect of losing the last remaining pile of cash overrides his fear of federal prison. He lunges toward the center of the stage, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You are lying." Jamal screams, spittle flying from his lips. "You cannot touch that money. I am the primary co-signer on all Vanguard corporate accounts. The bank requires dual authorization for any transfer of that magnitude. You cannot move a single cent without my physical signature." Jada. The bank will reject the transfer immediately. I will call the wealth manager right now and have the accounts frozen. I look at Jamal, letting a slow, chilling smile spread across my face. I pity his absolute ignorance. He still thinks he is playing a game he can win. "You really think I walked onto the stage without locking all the exits first, Jamal?" I ask, my tone dripping with lethal condescension. "I didn't just bring that forensic audit to project on a screen for your mother's country club friends. I submitted the entire dossier, including every single forged signature and offshore routing number, to the federal banking regulators and the Securities and Exchange Commission at 3 o'clock this afternoon." Jamal freezes. The color violently drains from his face. "The bank has already frozen your access," I reveal, driving the final nail into his coffin. When federal regulators flag an account for multi-million-dollar corporate embezzlement, they do not wait for dual authorization. Every single Vanguard account, every credit line, every offshore shell company you set up for Chloe is completely locked down, pending a mandatory federal review. Your name is toxic. You cannot authorize a transfer, you cannot withdraw cash, and by tomorrow morning, you will not even be able to buy a cup of coffee with a Vanguard corporate card. You have absolutely nothing. The absolute finality of my words shatters whatever illusion of control the Vanguard family had left. Terrence lets out a hollow, agonizing groan, curling inward on the floor as the reality of his total ruination settles over him. He chose his mother's empire, and now he gets to watch that empire burn to the ground. Jamal sinks back against the wall, clutching his chest, hyperventilating as the terrifying specter of a federal indictment becomes his new reality. The crowd in the ballroom has turned completely against them. The whispers have escalated into a hostile, judgmental roar. The elite society Vivian worshipped is actively watching her drown, and no one is throwing her a life preserver. Vivian realizes that her money, her power, her reputation, and her entire identity have just been publicly incinerated. The elegant, controlled matriarch vanishes entirely. The psychological snap is visible, a violent fracturing of her mind as she loses everything she ever valued. She turns to me, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. Her eyes are wide and manic, completely devoid of reason. "You ruined my family!" Vivian shrieks, her voice tearing through the ballroom like shattered glass. "You arrogant, filthy outsider! You stole my money! You ruined my sons!" Before anyone can react, Vivian lunges at me. She closes the distance between us with terrifying speed, her hand raised high in the air, her fingers curled into a rigid claw, fully intending to strike me across the face. A collective gasp erupts from the audience. The security guards finally twitch, realizing the physical danger, but they are too far away to intercept her in time. Terrence yells out a warning from the floor, but he is too paralyzed by his own despair to move. I do not flinch. I do not step back. I plant my feet firmly on the stage, squaring my shoulders, staring directly into the eyes of a woman who has completely lost her mind. Vivian halts just inches from my face, her raised hand trembling with violent rage. The blinding light of the projectors illuminates the sheer murderous intent radiating from her. I should have pushed you harder off that terrace, Vivian screams, the words tearing out of her throat with vicious, unrestrained malice. I should have made sure you went over the railing. I should have killed you and that bastard child when I had the chance. The entire ballroom goes dead silent. The hostile roaring of the crowd instantly stops, replaced by a horrifying collective shock. The air is sucked out of the room. The wealthy socialites, the corporate board members, the politicians, every single person present has just heard one of the most prominent women in Atlanta publicly confess to attempted murder. I look at Vivian's raised hand and then directly into her manic, furious eyes. The trap I spent 7 agonizing months building has finally snapped shut, and she walked right into it, completely blind to the consequences. I tilt my head, letting a cold, lethal smile touch my lips. I lean directly into the microphone. Say that again. I command, my voice steady, smooth, and echoing with the finality of a closing tomb, loudly. My command hangs in the air, vibrating through the heavy silence of the ballroom. Vivian freezes. Her arm is still raised, her fingers curled into rigid claws, but the manic fury in her eyes suddenly shifts into raw, unadulterated panic. The echo of her own voice screaming her murderous confession into a live microphone finally registers in her fractured mind. She looks out at the audience. She sees the faces of her peers, the local elite, the board members, all staring back at her with absolute unfiltered revulsion. She realizes with crushing certainty that she just publicly confessed to attempted murder. I do not give her a single second to walk it back. I do not let her spin a new lie or claim temporary insanity. I look up at the audiovisual booth and give the final definitive signal. The massive projection screens flanking the stage go completely black. The silence in the room deepens, becoming a physical weight pressing down on everyone present. Then the darkness on the screens is pierced by the harsh, grainy glow of a street lamp. The image sharpens, resolving into brilliant high-definition security footage. It is not a spreadsheet. It is not a bank transfer. It is a surveillance camera feed. The timestamp in the bottom right corner flashes in stark white numbers dating back exactly 7 months. The location watermark in the top left corner reads Vanguard Hotel Rooftop Terrace. A collective gasp ripples through the country club. Every single eye in the room is glued to the screens. They are watching a ghost from the past come to life. On the massive displays, a younger, slightly thinner version of myself steps into the frame. The night air in the video is moving my hair. I am standing near the edge of the ornate marble staircase that leads down from the upper terrace. I am holding a small, delicate strip of glossy paper in my hands. The sonogram. I am looking down at it with an expression of pure, unadulterated joy. It was the exact moment I had planned to tell Terrence that after years of heartbreak, we were finally going to be parents. Then the figure of Vivian Vanguard strides into the frame. She is wearing a silver evening gown, holding a glass of champagne. She looks exactly as elegant and composed in the video as she did walking into this gala tonight. The AV technician hits a switch and the audio feeds directly into the ballroom's state-of-the-art surround sound system. The digital enhancement scrubs away the background wind, leaving the voices crystal clear. The entire gala listens in dead silence as the past plays out in front of them. They hear my voice vibrating with excitement telling Vivian the news. They hear me explain that I am pregnant. They hear me say that Terrence is going to be a father. The crowd watches Vivian's face on the screen. There is no joy. There is no congratulatory smile. Instead, her features twist into a mask of pure demonic rage. The elegant matriarch vanishes, replaced by a ruthless, calculating monster. You think I am going to let a common street rat permanently tie herself to my family legacy? Vivian's voice echoes through the ballroom, sounding distorted and cruel. You think I am going to let your bastard child inherit the Vanguard name? The people in the audience physically recoil. The sheer venom in her recorded voice is paralyzing. They watch as the video version of myself takes a step back, my face registering shock and deep confusion. I clutch the sonogram to my chest protectively. I watch Vivian step forward on the screen. Her movements are deliberate. Her intent is entirely malicious. She does not stumble. She does not trip. She raises her hands, places them flat against my shoulders, and shoves me with every ounce of physical strength she possesses. The ballroom erupts in a chorus of genuine horrified screams. They watch my body pitch backward. They watch my arms flail wildly, desperately searching for a handrail that is completely out of reach. They watch the sickening, violent tumble as I fall backward down the steep, unforgiving flight of solid marble stairs. The audio captures the brutal, bone-crunching thuds of my body striking the stone steps. It captures my terrified, breathless scream. But the most damning part of the footage is not the fall. It is what happens immediately after. The camera angle captures Vivian perfectly. She steps up to the edge of the landing and looks down at my broken, bleeding body, lying motionless at the bottom of the stairs. She does not scream for help. She does not pull out her phone to call an ambulance. She simply takes a calm, measured sip of her champagne, turns on her heel, and casually walks back toward the hotel penthouse, leaving me to bleed out in the dark. The video pauses on that final chilling frame of Vivian walking away. The reaction inside the Peachtree Country Club is absolutely explosive. The polite, restrained veneer of high society completely shatters. The room descends into total chaos. Women are covering their mouths, sobbing in genuine horror. Men are shouting, their faces red with fury. The prominent pastor, the man who had baptized Terrence and Jamal, the man who had counseled Vivian through decades of supposed spiritual devotion, stands up from his chair. He does not say a word. He simply looks at Vivian with a gaze of profound biblical disgust. He shakes his head, turns his back to the stage, and briskly walks down the center aisle, leading a mass exodus of the remaining moral pillars of their community. At the prime tables, the Vanguard corporate board members are in a state of absolute unmitigated panic. They are not just watching a family scandal, they are watching the very public destruction of their corporate brand. They pull their phones from their pockets with shaking hands, dialing frantically. "Get PR on the line right now!" A senior board member shouts, his voice carrying over the din of the crowd. "Draft a press release. Sever all ties. The Vanguard name is dead. Get her off the board immediately. We need a complete distancing strategy by midnight or our stock is going to zero." They are actively throwing Vivian to the wolves, severing decades of lucrative partnerships in a matter of seconds. She is entirely radioactive. On the floor in front of me, Terrence is experiencing a complete psychological collapse. He has spent the last 7 months desperately clinging to the fabricated narrative his mother spoon-fed him. He has spent 7 months telling himself that I was mentally unstable, that I had slipped on the stairs during a hysterical episode, that his mother was merely trying to protect him from a deranged wife. Now he is staring up at a 40-foot-tall projection of his own mother, deliberately attempting to murder the woman he loved and the child she was carrying. He watches her walk away from my bleeding body to finish a glass of champagne. Terrence lets out a sound that I can only describe as a dying animal. It is a primal, guttural wail of sheer agony. He grabs his own hair, pulling at the roots, rocking back and forth on the floor. He cannot look at me. He cannot look at his mother. He vomits violently onto the pristine white carpet, his body physically rejecting the toxic, monstrous reality of the family he chose over me. He is utterly, irreversibly broken. Jamal, still pressed against the back curtain, stares at his mother as if she is a stranger. He may be a thief, he may be a coward, but the stark, undeniable proof of attempted murder pushes even him over the edge. He recoils from her, sliding further away along the wall, wanting absolutely nothing to do with the woman who gave birth to him. Vivian is frozen. Her arm has finally dropped to her side. The violent homicidal energy that possessed her just moments ago has evaporated, replaced by a cold, suffocating terror. She looks at the frozen frame of herself on the screen. She looks at the disgusted faces of the board members actively drafting her termination. She looks at Terrence heaving on the floor, destroyed by her actions. She looks at Jamal shrinking away from her in fear. She is entirely alone. Her empire is gone. Her wealth is frozen. Her reputation is permanently annihilated. Vivian's chest heaves as she gasps for air. Panic, raw and unfiltered, finally takes the wheel. She realizes that the social ruin is only the beginning. The forensic audit means federal prison for embezzlement, but the video playing on the screen means state prison for attempted murder. She is going to be locked in a cage. She slowly turns her head, her manicured hands trembling violently. She looks past the furious crowd, past the empty VIP tables, and stares directly at the massive heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom. It is her only exit. It is her only chance to run. She takes a tentative step forward, preparing to flee the stage, preparing to push her way through the hostile crowd and escape into the night. But before she can take a second step, the heavy oak doors are violently shoved open from the outside. The loud, echoing crash of the thick wood hitting the brass stops Vivian dead in her tracks. The ballroom instantly falls quiet again, every head turning toward the entrance. The darkness of the country club foyer has been completely replaced. Brilliant, blinding flashes of red and blue light pulse through the tall glass windows, casting harsh, rotating shadows across the elegant walls of the ballroom. The rhythmic strobing lights paint Vivian's terrified face in alternating shades of crimson and sapphire. A team of heavily armed uniformed police officers steps into the room, their utility belts clinking loudly in the deafening silence. Leading them is a stern-faced detective holding a thick stack of manila folders, flanked by two agents wearing dark windbreakers, bearing the bright yellow letters of the FBI. They march directly down the center aisle, their boots striking the polished floor with rhythmic, terrifying finality. They are not looking at the crowd. They are not looking at the screens. They are looking directly at the stage. They are looking directly at Vivian and Jamal. I stand at the podium perfectly still, bathed in the flashing police lights. I look down at Vivian, who is trembling so violently she can barely remain standing. The trap is completely sealed. There is nowhere left to run. I smile. It is a slow, cold, deeply satisfying expression. The sweet, glorious taste of absolute vengeance settles perfectly on my tongue. I lean into the microphone one last time, my voice echoing over the heavy footsteps of the approaching officers. Enjoy your new empire, Vivian. The echo of Vivian's murderous confession hangs in the air, captured perfectly by the stage microphone and blasted through the country club's premium acoustic system. Her words bounce off the vaulted ceilings, mingling with the heavy rhythmic thud of police boots marching down the center aisle. The flashing red and blue lights from the courtyard completely dominate the room, casting long, erratic shadows against the elegant velvet drapery. The entire Peachtree Country Club is paralyzed, caught in the blinding glare of a criminal takedown. Vivian stands frozen at the edge of the stage. Her arm drops limply to her side. The violent, homicidal adrenaline that fueled her just seconds ago completely evaporates, replaced by a cold, suffocating wave of primal terror. She stares at the approaching officers, her chest heaving, her eyes darting frantically side to side like a trapped animal. She looks back at the massive projection screen, which is still displaying the frozen security footage of her walking away from my bleeding body on the hotel terrace. The undeniable high-definition proof of her absolute depravity is towering 40 feet above her head. The team of uniformed officers reaches the base of the stage, fanning out to secure the perimeter. They move with practiced, tactical precision, entirely unimpressed by the crystal chandeliers, the expensive floral arrangements, or the collective net worth of the audience. A tall, sharp-featured man in a dark trench coat steps forward, separating himself from the line of uniforms. He does not look like a standard beat cop. He carries an air of absolute, unyielding authority. I step out from behind the podium, maintaining a posture of total command. I look down at Vivian, who is currently trembling so violently that the diamonds around her neck are visibly shaking. "I didn't just bring receipts tonight, Vivian," I say, my voice carrying a quiet, lethal edge that cuts cleanly through the chaos. "I brought the district attorney." The man in the trench coat ascends the short flight of stairs. He pulls a leather badge wallet from his pocket and flips it open, displaying the gold shield to Vivian. "Vivian Vanguard. I am District Attorney Miller," he states, his voice deep and entirely devoid of sympathy. "We have been reviewing a highly compelling evidentiary dossier provided by your daughter-in-law's legal team for the past several hours. And based on the audio surveillance we just witnessed, along with the corroborating video evidence displayed behind you, you are under arrest for attempted murder, aggravated assault, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The words hit Vivian like a physical strike. Her entire body recoils. The polite, refined mask of the Southern socialite completely shatters, exposing the desperate, vicious narcissist underneath. As two uniformed officers step onto the stage and reach for her arms, Vivian violently jerks away from them. "Get your hands off of me!" she shrieks, her voice reaching a hysterical, ear-piercing pitch. "Do you have any idea who I am? I am Vivian Sinclair Vanguard. I sit on the board of the City Planning Commission. I play golf with the mayor. I have the police commissioner on speed dial. You cannot come into my private gala and touch me. I will have all of your badges. I will sue this entire city into bankruptcy." She flails wildly, her manicured nails swiping at the air, her expensive silk gown twisting around her legs. It is a pathetic, undignified display of arrogance crashing into reality. The officers do not hesitate. They do not care about her golf partners or her empty threats. They step inside her guard, grabbing her wrists with practiced, unapologetic force. They spin her around, pinning her arms behind her back. The sharp metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs echoes loudly through the stage microphone. It is the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. Vivian struggles against the restraints, her breath coming in ragged, panicked gasps. She looks out at the audience, desperately searching for a lifeline. She looks at the politicians she funded, the judges she hosted for dinner, the elite socialites she spent her entire existence trying to dominate. She expects them to rise up to demand her release to protect one of their own. Instead, she is met with a wall of cold, unblinking camera lenses. The very people she worshipped are actively recording her destruction. The matriarchs of Atlanta high society are capturing every second of her humiliating arrest to share in their exclusive group chats. The board members of the Vanguard Corporation are already dialing their public relations teams, urgently shouting instructions to draft press releases completely disavowing any connection to her. They are watching her complete moral bankruptcy unfold, and they are actively stepping over her body to protect themselves. She is entirely alone, handcuffed in a designer ball gown, stripped of her power, her wealth, and her freedom. As the officers begin to read Vivian, her Miranda rights, another group of agents moves purposefully toward the back of the stage. These men and women are wearing dark windbreakers with the bright yellow letters of the FBI printed across their backs. They bypass Vivian entirely and surround Jamal and Chloe. Jamal is still sitting on the floor, his back pressed against the heavy velvet curtain. He looks up at the federal agents with hollow, defeated eyes. The arrogant swagger of the golden child has been completely erased. He knows the offshore accounts have been seized. He knows the forged signatures have been authenticated. He knows there is absolutely no way to talk himself out of a federal indictment. Jamal Vanguard and Chloe Sinclair. Vanguard, a lead federal agent, announces holding up a thick stack of warrants. You are both being detained for immediate questioning regarding multiple counts of federal wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and international money laundering. Stand up and place your hands behind your backs. Jamal slowly pushes himself off the floor, offering no resistance. He extends his wrists, utterly broken. But Chloe reacts entirely differently. The realization that her fake life of luxury has just culminated in a federal arrest warrant shatters her completely. She looks at the FBI agents, then looks at the steel handcuffs being secured around her husband's wrists. Her survival instinct, honed by years of desperate social climbing, kicks into overdrive. She violently shoves Jamal away from her, stumbling backward. "Do not touch me!" Chloe screams, her voice cracking with sheer panic. "I had absolutely nothing to do with this. I did not know where the money was coming from. He lied to me. He told me his mother authorized the transfers. He set up those offshore accounts without my permission. He is a thief and a liar, and I am completely innocent." She is throwing her husband to the wolves without a single second of hesitation. The woman who just 20 minutes ago was boasting about being the future of the Vanguard family is now actively begging the federal government to lock her husband away so she can save her own skin. Jamal turns his head and looks at his wife. The profound betrayal on his face is almost tragic. He forged documents, risked federal prison, and destroyed his brother's trust entirely to fund her insatiable greed, and the moment the bill comes due, she points the finger directly at him. He realizes that she never loved him. She only loved the money he stole for her. The FBI agents are entirely unmoved by Chloe's theatrical breakdown. The lead agent grabs her by the arm, spinning her around and securing the handcuffs over her wrists. "You are the registered owner of Apex Solutions LLC, ma'am," the agent states coldly. "Over $2 million of stolen corporate funds were routed directly into accounts under your exclusive control. You can explain your sudden onset of innocence to the federal prosecutor." Chloe bursts into loud, ugly sobs, her carefully applied makeup running down her face as she realizes her fate is sealed. The federal penitentiary is her new reality. The police and the federal agents begin the process of marching the Vanguard family off the stage. They guide Vivian, Jamal, and Chloe down the short flight of stairs and directly up the center aisle of the ballroom. The sea of wealthy guests parts instantly, pulling their chairs back, refusing to let the disgraced family brush against their expensive clothing. It is the ultimate perp walk. Vivian keeps her head down, her face shielded by her messy hair, completely humiliated. Chloe continues to sob and scream about her innocence. Jamal walks in total defeated silence. I stand at the podium, my hands resting lightly on the wood, watching them disappear through the heavy oak doors. The flashing red and blue lights swallow them whole, and the doors swing shut behind them, sealing their fate. The Vanguard Empire has been officially dismantled. The stage is entirely empty, save for me and the man still kneeling on the floor. Terrence has not moved. He has remained on the carpet, his knees pressed into the floorboards, watching his mother, his brother, and his sister-in-law being paraded out in handcuffs. He has watched his entire bloodline be arrested for unimaginable crimes. He has watched the legacy he was groomed to inherit be exposed as a fraudulent, rotting corpse. The ballroom is eerily quiet now. The guests are whispering, but the overwhelming chaos has settled into a state of shell-shocked paralysis. Terrence slowly lifts his head. His face is pale, his eyes bloodshot and swollen. The custom tuxedo he wore to celebrate his impending freedom from me is rumpled and stained. He looks around the empty stage. He looks at the massive projection screens, which are now blank, the evidence of his family's crimes permanently burned into his retinas. He realizes the absolute totality of his loss. In a single evening, he has lost his multi-million-dollar trust fund. He has lost his mother to a prison cell. He has lost his brother to a federal indictment. He has lost his marriage. He has lost his child. He has lost the respect of every single person in this room. He is completely and utterly destitute in every possible way a man can be. He turns his body slowly, looking up at me. I am standing tall, my pregnant belly pushing against the emerald silk, holding the divorce papers Marcus handed me earlier. I am the only thing left standing in the wreckage of his life. Terrence looks at me, his expression completely hollowed out by despair. His voice is barely a hoarse, ragged whisper echoing faintly through the quiet ballroom. What am I supposed to do now? The question hangs in the stale, suffocating air of the ballroom, suspended over the wreckage of the Vanguard Empire, like a white flag waving over a bombed-out city. Terrence remains on his knees, his hands trembling in his lap, his tear-streaked face turned up toward me. He looks completely hollowed out. The arrogant, comfortable heir to a multi-million-dollar legacy has been violently stripped away, leaving behind a terrified, paralyzed child who has absolutely no idea how to function in a world where his mother cannot write a check to solve his problems. He is waiting for me to give him an answer. He is waiting for the woman he married, the woman who spent a decade organizing his schedule, managing his household, and smoothing over his anxieties, to reach down and offer him a blueprint for his survival. He expects me to tell him what to do next, because he has never had to figure it out for himself. I look down at him from the podium. I search my heart for even a microscopic fraction of pity, a single drop of residual empathy for the man I once thought I would spend the rest of my life with. I find absolutely nothing. The well is completely dry. You are going to learn how to live in the real world, Terrence, I say, my voice steady, analytical, and entirely devoid of emotion. For 36 years you have existed inside a padded, temperature-controlled bubble, funded by a trust you did not earn, and maintained by a mother who crippled your independence to ensure your absolute loyalty. You traded your spine for a guaranteed inheritance. You let Vivian make every major decision of your adult life because it was easier than taking responsibility for your own choices. You let her dictate your career, your social circle, and eventually you let her dictate the end of your marriage. Terrence squeezes his eyes shut, fresh tears spilling over his lashes as the brutal, unvarnished truth washes over him. He lets out a ragged, shallow breath, shaking his head side to side in a desperate, silent plea for me to stop. I do not stop. I am performing a psychological autopsy and I will not leave until the cause of death is perfectly clear. You asked me what you are supposed to do now. I continue, my words echoing sharply through the quiet room. You are going to get a job that you actually have to interview for. You are going to learn how to pay your own rent. You are going to hire a criminal defense attorney for your mother and your brother, and you are going to realize very quickly how expensive loyalty can be when the bank accounts are frozen. You are going to experience the profound, terrifying reality of facing the consequences of your own actions without a safety net to catch you. I take a deliberate step away from the podium, moving closer to the edge of the stage, looking directly down into his bloodshot eyes. You are going to learn how to be a man without your mother pulling the strings, I tell him, delivering the final crushing blow to his ego. But you will do it far, far away from me. Terrence scrambles forward on his knees, his hands reaching out to grip the very edge of the wooden stage. He looks up at me with absolute panicked desperation. The realization that I am truly leaving, that this is the absolute end of our shared existence, finally breaks through his shock. Jada, please, he begs, his voice cracking thick with mucus and despair. Please do not leave me like this. I have nothing left. I have nobody left. They are all gone. You are my wife. We are having a baby. I will do whatever you want. I will go to any therapist. I will sign whatever documents you put in front of me. Just please tell me we can fix this. Tell me there is a chance for us to rebuild. I will spend the rest of my life making this right. I stare at his grasping hands, feeling a cold, settling revulsion. The absolute audacity of his request, the sheer staggering entitlement required to ask for a second chance after leaving me to be slaughtered by his family, confirms everything I need to know. There is no us to rebuild, Terrence, I reply, my tone dropping to a lethal, freezing whisper that carries through the silence of the room. The woman who would have forgiven you died the moment you handed me those forged psychiatric commitment papers. You do not get to participate in my future simply because you are terrified of your own. I reach down and pick up the thick stack of divorce and custody documents from the podium. I drop them directly onto the stage floor right in front of his grasping fingers. The heavy thud of the paper hitting the wood sounds like a gavel striking a block. Read the custody parameters very carefully. I instruct him, stripping away the last remaining shred of his hope. You no longer have a wife, and you do not have a partner. You are a highly restricted biological contributor. Going forward, the only communication we will ever have will be through a monitored, court-approved co-parenting application. You will not call my personal phone. You will not send me text messages. You will not email me. If you attempt to approach my home, my office, or me in public, my private security team will immediately have you arrested for violating the restraining order that my legal team filed this morning. Terrence stares at the legal documents on the floor as if they are a venomous snake. His mouth opens, but no sound comes out. If you want to inquire about the health of the child, you will send a message through the app. I continue laying out the absolute non-negotiable boundaries of his new reality. If you want to request your legally permitted, heavily supervised visitation hours, you will submit that request to my attorneys. You will only be granted access if a court-appointed psychologist deems you mentally and emotionally fit to be in the same room as my daughter. You have zero legal authority over her education, zero authority over her medical care, and zero authority over her geographical location. You are entirely locked out, Lee. I watch the light completely die in his eyes. The frantic, desperate energy drains out of him, leaving him slumped against the edge of the stage, a broken, empty vessel. He does not argue. He does not beg anymore. He finally understands the absolute permanence of his destruction. He is looking at a stranger. I turn my back on him. I do not offer a final goodbye. I do not offer a lingering look of regret. I simply turn away, dismissing his existence entirely. I gather my clutch, adjusting the emerald silk of my gown, and walk toward the side stairs of the stage. The Peachtree Country Club ballroom is a sprawling graveyard of the Vanguard legacy. The elite guests, the politicians, the corporate board members, and the high society matriarchs are all standing frozen at their tables. They have just witnessed a masterclass in absolute calculated annihilation. They have watched me single-handedly dismantle the most powerful, untouchable family in Atlanta without breaking a single drop of sweat. As I reach the bottom of the stairs and step onto the main floor, a profound, terrifying shift happens within the crowd. The guests closest to me physically recoil. They pull their chairs back, scraping the legs loudly against the hardwood floor. They press themselves against the tables, shrinking away from my proximity. I walk slowly down the wide center aisle of the ballroom, and the crowd literally parts like the Red Sea to let me through. I keep my head held high, my posture perfectly rigid, my face an impenetrable mask of total authority. I look at the people standing on either side of the aisle. I see the women who used to whisper behind their hands about my background, the women who laughed at Vivian's cruel jokes about my lack of pedigree. They are not laughing now. They are staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes, their faces pale with a mixture of profound awe and sheer, unadulterated terror. They realize that I am an apex predator, and they are terrified that if they make sudden eye contact, I might decide to destroy their lives next. I see the corporate executives who happily turned a blind eye to Jamal's shady accounting practices. They are sweating, gripping their cell phones, terrified that my forensic audit might contain their names. They lower their heads respectfully as I pass, silently acknowledging the new hierarchy. The Vanguard name is dead, and I am the one who buried it. The only sound in this massive vaulted room is the sharp, rhythmic click of my heels against the polished floorboards. It is the steady, undeniable march of total victory. I do not smile. I do not gloat. True absolute power does not require celebration. It merely requires recognition, and I have the undivided, terrified recognition of every single person in this room. I reach the back of the ballroom. The heavy oak doors, still propped open from the police raid, loom ahead of me. I step through the threshold, leaving the stifling, perfume-choked air of the country club behind. I step out onto the grand portico. The crisp, cool night air of Atlanta hits my face clean and refreshing. The frantic flashing of the red and blue police lights has faded into the distance, carrying Vivian and Jamal toward their new reality. The circular driveway is quiet, save for the low, powerful hum of a sleek black town car waiting directly at the curb. Marcus is standing by the rear passenger door. He does not say a word, but the slight respectful nod he gives me speaks volumes. He reaches out and pulls the heavy door open, stepping aside to let me enter. I slide into the plush, quiet luxury of the leather seat. Marcus closes the door behind me with a solid, isolating thud, instantly cutting off the ambient noise of the city. The interior of the car is a sanctuary of total, uninterrupted peace. I lean my head back against the headrest, letting out a long, slow exhale. The tension that has lived in my shoulders for 7 agonizing months finally completely evaporates. I place my right hand gently over the curve of my stomach, resting my palm against the emerald silk. Suddenly I feel it, a strong, distinct rhythmic kick against my hand. It is not a flutter. It is a powerful, undeniable surge of life, a sharp reminder of exactly why I burned the Vanguard Empire to the ground. I smile in the darkness of the cabin, tracing a slow circle over the spot where my daughter just made her presence known. I fought the hardest, most brutal battle of my life to ensure she would never be controlled, never be diminished, and never be subjected to the toxic poison of the family that tried to erase her. The war is over, but the reign has just begun. Exactly 1 month has passed since the night I detonated the Vanguard family legacy. I stand quietly by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, a cup of herbal tea warming my hands. looking out over the sprawling, glittering skyline of Atlanta. The city lights stretch out for miles, a vast ocean of electricity and motion. But up here in the sanctuary I purchased with my own heavily guarded assets, the world is perfectly still. The tension that had coiled tightly around my spine for the better part of a year has completely evaporated, replaced by a profound settling peace. The war is over, and the battlefield has been entirely cleared of enemy combatants. The fallout from the Peachtree Country Club Gala was spectacular, brutal, and absolute. True to their nature, the elite social circles of Atlanta did not offer grace or support to a fallen matriarch. They devoured her. The local news stations acquired the unedited security footage from the hotel terrace, and it played on a continuous loop across every major broadcast network for a solid week. Vivian Sinclair, Vanguard. The once untouchable queen of respectability politics. The woman who dictated country club memberships and charity board seats was swiftly denied bail. The presiding judge cited her immense wealth, international connections, and obvious flight risk, completely unmoved by her hysterical tears. Vivian now sits in a sterile concrete cell in the Fulton County Jail, stripped of her emerald silks, her diamond tennis bracelets, and her perfectly curated vanity. She wears a standard-issue orange jumpsuit, awaiting a criminal trial where she faces a minimum of 15 years in state prison for attempted murder and aggravated assault. There are no galas to attend in lockup. There are no caterers to bully, no junior committee members to manipulate, and no audience left to impress. She is trapped in a cage with nothing but the deafening echo of her own horrific choices. Jamal's ruin was equally swift and surgically precise. Federal regulators moved with terrifying, unapologetic speed, seizing every corporate account, freezing every personal asset, and completely dismantling the complex web of offshore shell companies he had built to hide his theft. He is currently out on a heavily restricted federal bond, wearing a bulky GPS ankle monitor, and awaiting trial for massive corporate wire fraud, embezzlement, and international money laundering. He is facing decades in federal prison. The moment the FBI placed the steel handcuffs around his wrists in that ballroom, Chloe's loyalty instantly and predictably evaporated. True to her parasitic nature, she filed for a viciously contested divorce before the sun even came up the next morning. Once she realized the money was truly gone and the Vanguard name had become utterly radioactive, she jumped ship, desperately trying to leverage a plea deal with federal prosecutors by throwing Jamal entirely under the bus. They turned on each other the second the cash stopped flowing, proving to the entire world that their existence was built on nothing but transactional greed and mutual narcissism. Then there is Terrence. I take a slow sip of my tea, staring at my reflection in the dark glass of the window, feeling absolutely nothing for the man I once called my husband. His reality is the most poetic justice of all. Stripped of his $6 million grandfather trust, fired from his honorary executive position at the now-defunct family firm, and locked out of all seized corporate accounts, Terrence is practically destitute. He currently resides in a cramped, poorly lit, 600-square-foot rented apartment on the industrial outskirts of the city. It is a neighborhood his mother would have previously refused to let her driver even pass through. He has no domestic staff to clean his clothes or prepare his meals. He has no aggressive wealth manager to automatically pay his bills. He has been forced to learn how to exist as a functioning, responsible adult for the very first time in his 36 years of life. Every single legal boundary I set has been enforced with an iron fist. He is legally barred from coming anywhere near my penthouse or my corporate office. If he wants any chance of seeing his daughter, he is strictly required to attend intense, twice-weekly court-mandated psychological therapy to address his profound enabling of emotional and physical abuse. Even if he somehow manages to complete the grueling year-long program, he will only be permitted heavily supervised visits inside a secure, monitored facility. I stripped away his money, his unearned status, and his access. I forced him to finally grow up, but I made sure he had to do it completely alone. He chose the comfort of his mother's toxic lies over the undeniable reality of my truth. And now he gets to sleep in the bed he made. The weeks following the gala blur together in a peaceful, quiet sanctuary of preparation. My home is filled only with people who actively love, respect, and fiercely protect me. Marcus handles the aggressive legal dismantling of my marriage, building an impenetrable wall of litigation that shields me from every pathetic weeping attempt Terrence makes to reach out. I ignore the noise of the outside world and focus entirely on the new life growing stronger inside me every single day. When the day of delivery finally arrives, there is no chaos. There is no hostile mother-in-law hovering in the corner of the hospital room, criticizing my choices and demanding to control the narrative. There is no weak, easily manipulated husband pacing the floor, waiting for someone else to tell him what to do or how to feel. The private birthing suite is bathed in soft, warm light and filled with low, calming music. Dr. Keisha is standing right beside my bed, expertly guiding me through the process, acting as both my brilliant, highly skilled physician and my fiercely loyal friend. The environment is grounded in absolute love, medical expertise, and unwavering support. The labor is physically demanding a brutal, exhausting test of physical endurance, but my mind is incredibly clear. I am entirely in control of my body, my environment, and my future. I push through the intense waves of pain with a fierce primal determination, knowing with absolute certainty that the world my child is entering is completely safe. When I finally deliver my daughter into the world, the sound of her first strong, healthy cry fills the room instantly, washing away every single ounce of trauma, fear, and betrayal I endured over the past year. Dr. Keisha gently wipes her down and places her warm, fragile body directly onto my bare chest. I wrap my shaking arms around her, pressing my lips against her damp forehead, weeping hot tears of pure, unadulterated triumph. She is beautiful. She is absolutely perfect. And she is entirely mine. Several days later, I stand in the quiet, beautifully decorated nursery of my penthouse, holding my infant daughter against my shoulder. She is sleeping soundly, her tiny chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. The room is softly illuminated by the moonlight spilling through the large windows, casting a gentle glow over the expensive crib and the plush rocking chair. I look down at her perfect, innocent face, marveling at the sheer miracle of her existence. She is the sole, untouchable beneficiary of a massive, legally secured empire. The $6 million trust is locked away in a heavily guarded generation, skipping account growing exponentially under aggressive management, completely shielded from the greedy, grasping hands of the people who happen to share her DNA. Vivian Vanguard and her toxic brood thought my working-class roots made me weak. They looked at my lack of a generational country club pedigree and arrogantly assumed I was a naive, easily manipulated target. They genuinely believed I would simply bow my head, swallow my pride, and quietly submit to their twisted, abusive respectability politics just to maintain access to their artificial wealth and social standing. They vastly underestimated the sheer terrifying elemental strength of a mother protecting her child. I did not just survive their coordinated attacks. I systematically tore their false rotting legacy down to the absolute studs. I exposed their financial crimes, eradicated their social power, and completely cleared the wreckage of their lives to build a real, impenetrable fortress in its place. The generational curse of silent suffering of women swallowing their dignity to protect the fragile egos of cowardly men permanently ends with me. I kiss my daughter's soft cheek, rocking her gently in the silent, peaceful room. The Vanguard name is nothing but a smoldering pile of ash. But from that ash, we have risen completely untouched. We are safe. We are genuinely wealthy. We are finally entirely free. True worth is never defined by toxic relatives who try to diminish your light. The most profound lesson here is that your value does not decrease simply because manipulative people refuse to see it. Real power comes from silent perseverance, financial independence, and the absolute courage to walk away from abusive environments. You do not owe any success to those who only offered conditional love and constant criticism. Healing always begins the moment you stop seeking validation from those committed to misunderstanding you. Please share your personal story of walking away from toxic family members in the comments section below.